Chapter 1486. It should have hit. They even felt the weapon cut into their flesh. Ah! A long scream resounded through the street. When the light dissipated, there was indeed a corpse on the ground that had been chopped beyond recognition. The 7 people were pleasantly surprised at first, but when they saw the corpse's face, they all turned pale with fright. The corpse on the ground was not Shui Yilan, but the person who had just pounced on Ning Xuema, their companion. Shui Yilan had already disappeared without a trace. Their expressions changed and they suddenly raised their heads. They saw Shui Yilan standing not far away, holding the dying woman in his arms, but his eyes were fixed in a certain direction. A person landed on the street, his black hair fluttering in the wind along with his white robe, and his silver mask flashed faintly under the sunlight. The 7 people naturally followed Shui Yilan's gaze, and when they saw the white-robed person, their eyes lit up. Di Zun. It was actually Di Zun who had appeared here alone. They immediately knelt down and shouted, "We pay our respects to Di Zun." Before their knees touched the ground, a white light flashed across the ground, and their bodies flew out involuntarily. Then they fell to the ground one after another. It was unknown whether it was a coincidence or Di Zun's punishment, but each of their knees touched the ground, a series of miserable cries sounded, and the 7 people's knees all shattered, and they fell to the ground, unable to stand up again. Di Zun. The 7 people opened their eyes wide, looking at the godlike man. Xinjiuli did not pay attention to them, and directly walked toward Shui Yilan, stretching out his hand. "Give her to me." Shui Yilan's expression changed and he could not help but take a step back. "You?" Xinjiuli's gaze fell on Ning Xuema's body and his pupils shrank. He staggered a little. Ning Xuema's bloody clothes were already half dry, and her face was pale yellow. Her eyes were slightly closed, and she was lying helplessly in Shui Yilan's arms, almost unable to see the rise and fall of her chest. Ding! Another drop of blood fell from the corner of her clothes, and it fell beside Shui Yilan's feet. There was no trace of life in her body, and her whole body was like a leaf blown away by the autumn wind. The leaf was withered and yellow and there was no green. She was like a knife that stabbed into Xinjiuli's chest. His heart felt like it was going to flip over at that moment. He actually hurt her so badly. How desperate must she have been when he left her, who was so heavily injured, with another woman. While he healed the other women, she was already on the verge of death. Even though he hated her and was determined to cut off all ties with her, he had never thought of taking her life. "Xuema. Xuema. I'm sorry." He waved his sleeves and with a flash of white light, Ning Xuema, who was originally lying in Shui Yilan's arms, was now in Xinjiuli's arms. Originally he just wanted to immediately heal her, but the moment she was in his arms, his heart felt like it was drowning, and he almost suffocated. It had been 10 years and in these 10 years he kept telling himself to give up, to stop thinking about her. But there were many sleepless nights where her figure flashed in front of his eyes. Many times in his dreams he hugged her, but when he woke up, he was faced with a room full of loneliness. Unknowingly she had become a demon in his heart that he could not get rid of, and unknowingly she had become his poppy existence. Now that he held her in his arms again, the familiar feeling and desire overwhelmed him, and it was so familiar that it almost suffocated him. Chapter 1487. The moment he held her in his arms, he had the urge to crush her into his body and never let her leave. She was as light as a leaf floating in the wind. Her eyes were slightly closed and she didn't move at all. Her face was frighteningly pale and her eyelashes were almost transparent. Her once plump lips were dry and pale, without a trace of color. There were no external injuries on her body, but they were more serious than any external injuries. She lay lifelessly in his arms, pale, weak, and without any signs of life. "Xuema." Xinjiuli's heart twitched as if countless needles had been stabbed into it, twisting it inch by inch. He would rather see her as vigorous and lively as she had been in the Heavenly Book Mountains. He did not want to see her so weak. Moreover, her weakness was all because of him. He held Ning Xuema's wrist and took her pulse with trembling fingers. She was like a lamp that had run out of oil. She was really like a lamp that had run out of oil. She had lost almost all the blood in her body. If she was a normal person she would have died long ago. The only reason she was still alive was because she had a half-immortal body and her soul was strong. Her wrist was ice cold. That coldness seemed to be able to drill into Xinjiuli's heart through his fingers. After he checked her pulse seriously, his expression changed slightly. Ning Xuema wasn't just suffering from postpartum hemorrhage. She had used some kind of forbidden technique before the hemorrhage. The image of Ning Xuema torturing Lizine like an Azura flashed before his eyes. His heart suddenly tightened. Luzine was someone who had just ascended to heaven rank level 1, and Ning Xuema was earth rank level 9. Logically speaking, Ning Xuema shouldn't be a match for Luzine. However, the scene he saw was that Ning Xuema had the absolute advantage and Luzine couldn't even retaliate. Shenjuli knew that Ning Xuema was extremely smart and had many tricks up her sleeves in battle. She could often defeat people who were stronger than her and beat them up until they cried for their parents. Even now, the Sun Moon sect still secretly spread the story of how she had slaughtered everyone when she had entered the sect, and how she had beaten up those who were several levels higher than her. Therefore, when he saw Ning Xuema using her absolute advantage to the point that Luzine couldn't retaliate, he didn't feel that this abnormal phenomenon was strange. Now, it seemed that she had used a forbidden technique to temporarily increase her power to achieve that effect. She used this forbidden technique at the cost of burning half of her blood essence. She was also pregnant. Logically speaking, even a little bit of blood essence was extremely precious and would not be wasted easily. Even if she was thinking about the baby in her womb, she shouldn't use such a method that would hurt both sides, unless the child in her womb was gone by then. That was why she was so crazy and reckless. He recalled the moment he saw Ning Xuema. She was covered in blood, and her dress was stained with blood. Her face was frighteningly pale, and her eyes seemed to be burning with fire. She even wanted to kill Luzine in front of him, as if she was her mortal enemy. Could it be that Luzine had already hurt the baby in her womb? When he arrived, she had already miscarried. More than half of the blood on her body was actually her own. Everyone would feel sorry for their child. If she had a miscarriage because of Luzine, then it wouldn't be strange for her to fight Luzine to the death. And what did he do? He slapped her when she just had a miscarriage. And it was on her lower abdomen. Chapter 1488. This made things worse for her, causing her to bleed profusely. At that time she was already in an extremely dangerous situation, yet he abandoned her and carried someone else away. The truth seemed to be about to surface, causing Shinjuli's heart to tremble. The fingers that were holding Ning Xuema's wrist trembled slightly. He lowered his eyes to look at her in his embrace. Right now she was completely lifeless. Her pulse was also intermittent, so weak that he almost couldn't feel it. Even her breathing was almost gone. If he hadn't carefully sensed her, he would have thought that she was already. He took a deep breath. Now wasn't the time to think about this. He had to go back and investigate the truth. Right now he only wanted to save her. Even if she couldn't stay by his side, he still hoped that she could live well. Xuema, I won't let you die. Don't be afraid, I will definitely save you. He took a deep breath and then slowly lowered his head. From the moment the ancestor appeared, the people who had closed their doors on the main street ran out one after another. In just a moment, many people had already gathered around them. Of course, these people didn't dare to really surround them. They only knelt from afar and curiously watched. The most frightening thing was to injure the bones. The pain of broken bones was definitely more ecstasy than any other pain. The 7 disciples of the Storm sect who had their knees broken were already sweating from the pain. If they weren't afraid of the ancestors' heavenly might, they would have howled on the spot. They suppressed the pain and pressed their acupoints. Only then did the pain lessen and they reluctantly raised their heads. Then they saw an incomparably shocking scene. The ancestor, who had always been aloof and untainted by the mundane world, actually kissed the woman in his embrace. The ancestor was obsessed with cleanliness. This was something that everyone in the continent knew. The woman in his embrace was covered in filth. Even her hair was stuck together with blood. She was so dirty that she couldn't be cured. Yet, the ancestor not only held her in his embrace, he even knelt down and kissed her. The ground was filled with eyeballs. The ancestor's action was simply shocking. Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Shuilan was standing on the side. He was also stupefied. Originally, he was very unwilling to hand over Momo in his arms to that powerful love rival, but he also understood that if his Momo still wanted to be saved, he could only rely on this person in front of him. Therefore he clenched his fists to resist the urge to snatch Ning Xuema back. He thought that Shinjuli would treat Ning Xuema immediately after taking her away, but he did not expect that he would lower his head and kiss her. He was instantly enraged. This bastard. At a time like this, he still wanted to take advantage of Momo. This was intolerable. Shuilan threw out a palm. Bastard. Who told you to be such a hooligan at this time? He had been running around for half a day and had to endure everyone's supercilious looks. He had a stomach full of pent-up anger, and at this moment he could no longer suppress it, so this palm strike was exceptionally powerful. A streak of red light shot towards Shinjuli's back like a bolt of lightning. Although he was angry, he still had a sense of propriety. Shinjuli was holding Ning Xuema, so he naturally could not attack in front of him. Therefore he attacked from behind. Careful. Someone cried out in alarm. At this moment Shinjuli seemed to be in a daze. He hugged Ning Xuema and kissed her passionately. Shuilan's red light hit his back. With a bang, everyone seemed to hear the sound of bones breaking. Shinjuli's face turned slightly pale, but his body did not move at all. His lips never left Ning Xuema's lips. Chapter 1489. Shuilan was simply speechless. He had seen rapists before, but he had never seen one who didn't care about his life. It was as if he wanted to kiss her even if she died. Wasn't this bastard already engaged to another woman? Why did he still want to take advantage of his Momo? Shuilan simply wanted to smash Shinjuli into pieces with one palm. However, that person was still the only hope to save Momo. Shuilan only felt a wave of anger rush to his head, but he couldn't find a place to vent it. In the blink of an eye he saw the 7 people from the Storm sect. Those people were also shrewd people. They probably knew that if they continued to stay here, they wouldn't have a good ending. They were just about to roll and crawl away on their hands and feet. Shuilan's eyes suddenly narrowed. For the sake of Ning Xuema, he was willing to lower his voice to these people and didn't hesitate to kneel down and beg. However, these people wanted to take advantage of the situation to trick and plot against him. Did they really think that he, the Demon Emperor, was fake? Just now, when those people were plotting against him, his heart was actually on guard. The moment those people attacked him, he immediately used his demonic technique to quickly evade and directly threw himself at Ning Xuema, who was lying on the single bed. Helplessly, the 8th person also rushed to the side of the single bed. Just as his hands were about to grab Ning Xuema, a white light flashed and directly wrapped around that person and dragged him in the direction of the other 7 people. Thus, the 7 Wind Cloud sect's disciples killed their companions. Shuilan understood that the white light was released by Shinjuli. That strength and that timing were not ordinary. Shinjuli rarely killed people, but this time his actions were not ordinary. Because everything had happened too quickly, those people didn't see clearly how their comrade had fallen under his sword. However, looking at the current situation, they had indeed angered the ancestor. Breaking their knees might just be the first punishment. When he was free and had time, he might give them a second punishment. Therefore, even if their legs were hurting unbearably, even if it was too embarrassing to escape in such a state, they couldn't care less. Just as they were about to escape, they heard Shuilan sneer, "You want to escape after toying with me?" 7 rays of red light shot out from his palms at the same time. They were exactly the same as the red light that had attacked Shinjuli. Each ray of red light chased after the middle of the back of a person. As a result, the 7 of them could only let out short screams as a bloody hole appeared in their backs. 7 people became 7 corpses. His move shocked the people who were watching from afar. Someone screamed and hurriedly got up and ran away. With one person running, it naturally led the others to run as well. Thus, the onlookers scattered like birds and beasts in the blink of an eye. Shinjuli seemed to be unaware of everything that was happening around him. He half knelt there and held Ning Xuema in his arms. The way he held her was a little strange, as if he was holding some kind of spell. As he kissed her deeply, Ning Xuema, who originally didn't have the slightest bit of vitality, gradually turned from pale to pale. It was as if new blood had been injected into her body, and finally, there was a little color on her face. Although the color was very faint, it was the hope of life. Shuilan originally wanted to give Shinjuli another slap to make him end this lecherous behavior. However, at this moment, when he saw Ning Xuema's complexion, his heart was moved. The red light that had been condensed in his palms slowly dissipated. Shinjuli's kiss lasted for 7 to 8 minutes. However, to Shuilan these 7 to 8 minutes felt as long as a century. Chapter 1490. Finally, Shinjuli let go of Ning Xuema's lips and raised his head. His face seemed to be much paler than before. His eyes were slightly lowered and his eyelashes were delicate. There was a faint trace of blood on his lips. As for Ning Xuema's lips, which were originally like flower petals that had been beaten by the wind and rain, they were now a bit brighter. Her eyes were still closed and she didn't move at all. She just obediently lay in his arms. "How is she?" Shuilan finally couldn't hold back and asked. Shinjuli didn't answer him. He lowered his eyes and looked at her in his arms. He gently pressed a hand on her back and activated his divine telekinesis, circulating it in her body. He looked at her for a moment, paused, and then lowered his head again. Was there an end to this? Shuilan angrily said, "Shinjuli, you don't have the ability to get close to her. Don't use healing to do something improper. Xinjuli still ignored him. This time, his lips landed on Ning Xuema's Zhusha mole between her eyebrows. Shuilan. He felt like he had nowhere to vent his anger. How did it feel to watch the person he loved being kissed by a scum, but he couldn't separate them? Shuilan was so angry that he was about to explode. He clenched his fists and sneered, Xinjuli, what's the use of you acting like you're in love with her? Let me tell you, Momo's heart has already been broken by you. If you want to treat her, then treat her properly. If you want to kiss her, then go hug your fiancée and kiss her. Momo thinks you're dirty? Xinjuli's mind was very strong. When he concentrated on something, the shouts of others were like the buzzing of mosquitoes to him. Now, all his energy was on Ning Xuema, who was in his arms, and he didn't hear Shuilan's shouts at all. His lips touched Ning Xuema's cinnabar mole. One of his hands was pressing on her back while the other hand was forming a spell. He was mumbling something, and a line of blood flowed from his lips into the space between Ning Xuema's eyebrows. After Shuilan finished yelling, he finally saw that the line of blood on Xinjuli's lips was connected to Ning Xuema's forehead. The line of blood was not disappearing, and Ning Xuema's face became even redder. What kind of healing technique was this? Shuilan opened his eyes wide and stopped yelling. He looked at Ning Xuema and saw that her complexion was getting better inch by inch. It was like a withered leaf that was being injected with chlorophyll again. However, Xinjuli's face was getting paler and paler. Finally, this strange healing technique stopped. Xinjuli slowly got up with Ning Xuema in his arms. He didn't know if it was because he had been kneeling for too long or because of other reasons, but his body swayed slightly. How is she? Shuilan asked anxiously. She's fine for now. This time Xinjuli finally opened his mouth. He was still hugging her as if he couldn't bear to let go of her for even a moment. For now. Shuilan raised his eyebrows. Her soul is weak and her blood and qi are unstable. She's in danger of bleeding out at any time. I need to use the bone marrow cleansing technique to reorganize her qi. It was rare for Xinjuli to explain so much. Shuilan was confused. However, he didn't really understand. This kind of medical knowledge couldn't be learned in a short period of time. How do I do it? I need an absolutely quiet room. Okay, I'll go prepare it. Shuilan was straightforward. He turned around and disappeared. Shuilan made this quiet room absolutely clean and absolutely quiet. He had used his power to create this quiet room on a green hillside. Although Shuilan liked to kill, he was also quite artistic. The room he built had white walls and black tiles, and the windows were quaint and elegant. It was very artistic. Chapter 1491. When Xinjuli saw this house, his feet paused for a moment. The style of this building was exactly the same as when Shuilan was living in seclusion with Ning Xuema in the Immortal Kingdom. It seemed like Shuilan had a special liking for this style of building. When Shuilan saw Xinjuli holding Ning Xuema, his heart filled with anger. Even though he knew that this person was here to treat Ning Xuema's illness, when he thought about how he was already engaged to another woman, Shuilan felt aggrieved for Ning Xuema. He stretched out his hand with a straight face. Give her to me. Xinjuli paused for a moment. He held Ning Xuema without any intention of letting go. He took in a light breath and said, She can't leave my hand right now. His palm had been pressed against Ning Xuema's back the entire time, as if he was transferring his spiritual force to her. Shuilan gave a cold laugh. I hope you're not trying to take advantage of her. She has nothing to do with you right now. Xinjuli did not say anything. Xinjuli, even if you save her right now, she won't be grateful to you at all. I know. Xinjuli's reply was short and simple. It was already good enough that she didn't stab him when she woke up, so why would she be grateful? Because saving her was more important. Xinjuli and Shuilan were too lazy to waste words and directly entered the room to save her. Because they needed absolute silence and no one could disturb them, Shuilan didn't wait for Xinjuli to speak and directly went out to be a guard. The method of changing one's marrow was incomparably complicated and there were countless steps. Moreover, it had to be done meticulously and there couldn't be a single mistake. This required the user to be completely focused and not be distracted at all. It was unknown if that bastard Shuilan did it on purpose or if he only knew how to design this kind of house. The layout of this quiet room was simply a copy of the bedroom Ning Xuema had when she was living in seclusion in the Immortal Empire. Xinjuli didn't know how long he had lingered outside that room and looked inside countless times, so he was naturally familiar with the layout inside. Now that he saw it again, his heart felt stuffy. 10 years did she and Shuilan spend in this kind of house? His gaze landed on the bed in the room. It was a rather spacious bed, big enough for 8 people to sleep on. The mattress on top was soft, and the top was a layer of red mattress. Embroidered on the mattress was a fox running in the wilderness. The little fox looked relatively young, with fluffy white fur and 8 tails swaying behind it. Shinjuli's eyes narrowed once again. This little fox's appearance was exactly the same as Shui Yamo when they first met. Even the 8 tails were exactly the same. He looked at the little fox for a moment, then his gaze suddenly moved away. He was an omnipotent god. In his life, there were only things he didn't want and nothing he couldn't obtain. He thought that with his ability, even if the other party came with a certain goal, he could make her change halfway through. He didn't expect. Back then he thought that he could hold her hand for life, but he didn't expect that the two of them would become strangers now. She was now someone else's wife, and even hugging her was a luxury. He could only take advantage of this moment. Shuilan, that bastard. His wife was pregnant, but he let her run away alone. His gaze swept across the big bed again. Overturning clouds with one turn of the hand, turning red waves with one turn of the hand. He didn't know why, but when these words appeared in his mind, his arm froze. Had she and Shuilan spent these 10 years on this kind of bed? His chest suddenly felt stuffy. Shinjuli took a deep breath. He felt that he couldn't think about it anymore. Chapter 1492. If he continued to think about it, he might just tear down the house. Shuilan, this bastard, must have done it on purpose. He only said that he needed a quiet room, but he didn't say that he needed a well-equipped bedroom. Did he deliberately provoke him? The layout of the house made Shinjuli have the urge to run away. However, he couldn't find another quiet room. He paused for a moment and waved his sleeves. A layer of sparkling white light flashed, and the unsightly furniture in the room disappeared, especially the big bed, without a trace. There was a white jade bed and a few praying mats in the place. Since he wanted to save someone, he couldn't leave anything unsightly in the house. He didn't want to be distracted and make mistakes during the rescue, which would make him regret it for the rest of his life. Shuilan was sitting on a branch of a big tree outside the small courtyard. This place had a good angle of view. Not only could he see the inside of the small courtyard, he could also see the surrounding scenery. Even if a fly flew over, he would be able to see it and kill it in time. He felt that he was very attentive and thoughtful. The quiet room was decorated according to the style that Momo used to like. When she woke up and saw the familiar layout, she might feel less sad. He was most satisfied with the big bed. Currently, Ning Shuema was still unconscious. To heal her injuries, she needed a comfortable place to lie down. She was injured so badly that Shinjuli might have to circle around her body to save her. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to do that if the bed was too small. Therefore, he specially made a king-sized bed. He was afraid that the bedboard would be too hard for Momo, so he personally made a few layers of bedding. Shuilan stretched his waist on the branch. He had just returned to this world from outer space and encountered such a situation as soon as he came back. He wanted to save someone so badly that he couldn't calm down to think. Now that he had a little free time, he began to think about some things. The first thing that came to his mind was, which bastard caused Momo to have a miscarriage? Who was the father of the child in her belly? He had been separated from her for a full 10 years. When they met again, she was injured and almost unconscious. She only said, "Baby, mommy is coming to accompany you." Her words were like a bomb that shocked him so much that he was at a loss. Because he was in a hurry to save her, he didn't think too much about it. Now he was puzzled. What had she experienced in the past 10 years? How in the world did she escape from that black hole of a whirlpool? Judging from Shinjuli's reaction, he didn't seem to have much interaction with her in the past 10 years. He didn't even know about the existence of this child, so this child was most likely not his. Then whose child was it? Could it be that Momo met and fell in love with another man in these 10 years, so she had that man's child? But why did she bring someone else's child to Shinjuli's engagement party? She even danced as a gift and smashed the pipa to sever everything. This was a bit like lingering feelings. Was the baby in her belly Shinjuli's? But the timing didn't match. Could it be that Momo and Shinjuli were entangled in this 1 year? But if they were entangled, it was impossible for Shinjuli not to know that the child was his. He wasn't an idiot. It was too strange. It was too hard to understand. Shuilan felt that his brain was about to be tied up. He looked at the quiet house in the distance. There was no movement in the house. Even the curtains were closed, so he couldn't see anything inside. Chapter 1493. Before Shinjuli went in, he had said that no matter what happened in the outside world, he was not to be disturbed. Therefore, although he had a question in his heart, he could not say it for the time being. He looked down at his hands. His fingers were slender and white. These hands had once held the military power of the demon realm. They could summon the wind and summon the rain. But no matter what he did, he could not win the heart of the woman he liked. Now he did not know whether the woman he loved the most was alive or dead. But he could only sit here and wait hopelessly. The hourglass of time flowed in this anxiety. In the quiet room, Ning Xuema's blood-stained clothes had already disappeared and were replaced by a red dress. The red dress was made from the best quality heavenly silkworm silk. Not only was it light and elegant, it also had the ability to defend against swords and sabers. This red dress was a treasure of the other world. Back then, the chivalrous and evil people in the other world fought to get this red dress. However, Shinjuli took advantage of it. He liked this red dress very much, so he took it back and put it in the storage space. These years, he would often go through the various space doors and go to various other worlds. He would often see things that were suitable for girls. Occasionally he would buy them on impulse. After buying them, he would feel annoyed and put them in a remote corner of his storage space. He thought that there would never be a day when this red dress would come in handy. He did not expect to use it now. She looked really good in this red dress that he got. But the size was slightly on the plump side. She was obviously pregnant, but her body was thinner than before. Her waist was so slender that it seemed like he could hold it with one hand. Her body was full of bloodstains. It was very eye-catching. Before he treated her, he had to clean her up. When he treated her as his wife, if he encountered such a situation, he would not hesitate to strip her naked and wash her thoroughly with rootless immortal water. But now no. She was someone else's wife. Even if he could not forget her, he could not be rude at this time. Therefore, he could only continuously use the cleansing incantation on her. Using the cleansing incantation required psychokinesis, and because he had given Ning Xuema a third of her god blood, he was somewhat weak. He knew that if he continued to heal her, he would have to consume a small amount of psychokinesis. He truly felt that his incomparably boundless psychokinesis was somewhat insufficient. When he held her in his arms again, he realized that he still desperately desired her. He longed to the point that he had the impulse to kill Shuilan outside to prevent any future troubles. But no. He had already hurt her badly enough. If he killed Shuilan as well, it was one thing for her to fight him with her life when she woke up, but he was afraid that she would be extremely sad. Therefore, even if Shuilan was an eyesore, he could not kill him. Perhaps in the future he would have to send people to protect him, lest he be accidentally destroyed by those cultivation sects. Just thinking about it made him feel vexed. Therefore, Shinjuli simply stopped thinking about it. At this moment, she was lying on the white jade bed that he had prepared with her eyes closed. After he cleaned her up with the cleansing spell, he had already used a spell to put on the red dress for her. Her hair was winding under her body, and the red dress finally reflected a trace of redness on her pretty little face. Red dress, she looked the best in red. This dress looked like a wedding dress. She was lying on the white jade bed that he had prepared for her, just like his bride. Shinjuli took a slight breath and pushed this unreliable thought out of his mind. Chapter 1494. He slowly lifted her up, and the two of them faced each other. He took her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. She was like a wooden doll, allowing him to play with her. It was rare for her to be so obedient. This was the most intimate position, as if it was the most beautiful time in the past. It was as if he had interlocked his fingers with hers on their wedding night. He had asked her if she regretted marrying him, and told her that he would give her a chance to go back on her words. How did she answer at that time? She said that marrying him was her greatest wish in this life. She said that she would never regret it. After saying that, she even kissed him with a red face. I can't think about it anymore. Now is not the time to think about this. He suppressed those messy thoughts that he shouldn't have at this moment, closed his eyes slightly, and probed her body first. The aura of God's power slowly entered her dantian. That place used to be a breeding ground for demons. At that time the demon lived here. He remembered that the refining of the copper cauldron didn't completely refine the demon. There should be some remnants inside. It was most likely that it was heavily injured and was sleeping inside. But nothing. He couldn't detect a trace of the demon's aura at all. Her dantian was very normal now. He knew that the demon was very cunning and very good at hiding. Usually it was easy for people to not detect it, but it couldn't hide from Shinjuli's God's power. Now even he couldn't sense it. Could it be that the demon had completely disappeared on its own? This wasn't possible. He muttered to himself for a moment, and a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Could it be that Momo's soul was too strong and took advantage of the demon's weakest moment to completely absorb it? When this thought appeared, it made him stiffen. Absorbing the demon in one's body, even a heaven rank level 4 immortal wouldn't be able to do it, not to mention that Ning Xuema was only at earth rank level 9. It was even more impossible for her to have this ability. Unless she was like him, a natural god, and this was even more impossible. Momo was only a nine-tailed fox in her previous life. She had nothing to do with God. He couldn't figure it out. Since he couldn't think of anything, he temporarily put it aside. No matter what, it was a good thing that the demon in her body had disappeared. Healing her injuries was more important now. He started to get busy, one step after another. His movements were so fast that it made people dazzled. His figure flashed as he circled around her, his fingers quickly tapping on many of her acupoints. This process was very painful for her. Shenjiuli had already prepared for her to cry out in pain while she was unconscious. Unexpectedly, she didn't move at all, as if she wasn't the one who was chosen. Was she really not in pain, or had she suffered more pain in the past so she was numb to it? Her face was slightly pale and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. However, she pursed her lips and did not make a sound. She did not even make a sound. Although her appearance was not enough to disturb the doctor's state of mind, it made Shenjiuli's heart twist. He forced himself to calm down and began the last step. Once again he pulled her hand over and placed his fingers against hers. He closed his eyes and activated his psychokinesis. Beads of blood appeared on all 10 of his fingers and seeped into her body through her fingers. Marrow cleansing meant that the two of them were connected by blood. The flow of his blood also joined the flow of her blood. It was equivalent to blood circulating between the two of them. Shenjiuli's blood was the blood of God. It had the power to purify everything. Even if her blood was exhausted and decayed, it would be rejuvenated and regain its energy under the influence of the blood of God. Chapter 1495. If he succeeded, not only would Ning Xuema's power not decrease, but it would also increase a lot. She might even be able to break through the earth rank and directly enter the heaven rank level 1, which would be a blessing in disguise. What he did not expect was that when his blood entered her body halfway, her originally slow blood flow suddenly started to boil. It was as if there was originally a sleeping dragon inside, and his divine power was an outsider who had invaded its territory. The dragon rose into the air, bared its fangs and brandished its claws to attack the intruder, vowing to drive the intruder out of its body. Shenjiuli was caught off guard, and the divine power he released almost fought with the power in Ning Xuema's body. If they really fought, then Ning Xuema's body would become a battlefield, and in the blink of an eye, her body would be destroyed until not even a strand of hair was left. Therefore he could only desperately withdraw his divine power when he sensed that something was wrong. He withdrew too quickly, and the divine power quickly backfired and directly hit his own body. In an instant, it was as if he had been pierced by thousands of steel needles. His face turned pale and cold sweat seeped out. He took half a step back and almost fell off the white jade bed. Without his support, Ning Xuema's body tilted to one side and fell to the ground. It was probably because the power in her body was awakened, and it was boiling and clamoring in her body. Shenjiuli could even see the veins on the surface of her skin moving like snakes, undulating like tides. Her face, which was originally slightly red, turned pale again. Sweat seeped out from the tip of her nose, and her teeth unconsciously bit down on her lips. Her lips were bitten until they bled and 2 drops of blood came out. Although Shenjiuli did not know what went wrong, he knew that he could not let her go on like this. Ignoring the pain in his body, he rushed to her side and carried her again, using ordinary telekinesis to guide her blood flow. After all, his telekinesis was strong, and ordinary telekinesis would not trigger the power in her body to fight back. After a while, the power in her body was like a little lion that had been successfully pacified, and it finally calmed down. Shenjiuli sighed softly and looked down at Ning Xuema in his arms. His gaze was faintly complicated. What exactly was she? This was the first time he had seen such power. He thought for a moment and used his ordinary telekinesis to search her body again, but he couldn't find anything at all. It was as if the mysterious force in her body had finally gone to sleep after defeating the enemy and was dormant again. Shenjiuli raised his hand and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. This matter was somewhat difficult to handle. It seemed like he had to carry out Plan B. However, the second plan was a little abrupt. But now, in order to save people, he couldn't care less. He slowly unbuttoned the front of her shirt, revealing her perfect collarbone and exquisite mounds. Her snow-white skin looked even more sparkling and translucent under the reflection of the pearls on top of her head. Although Shinjoli had always had a strong willpower, even if there were more than 10 beautiful and enchanting women dancing in front of him, he would still be able to maintain his composure and not even move his eyebrows. His heart would not have any ripples at all. However, the woman in front of him was the one he had always desired. She was the poppy in his heart that he couldn't bear to part with. In his previous life, he didn't know how many times he had made love with her. In this life they had also been intimate once, so he was very familiar with her body. At this moment, her clothes were half unbuttoned, and she was half sitting in front of him. That peerless spring scenery still made his mouth dry and his tongue dry. He suddenly moved his eyes away and stabilized his mind. His telekinesis gushed out from his palm and slowly injected into a certain vital acupuncture point on her chest. It quickly moved around her acupuncture point. Chapter 1496. This kind of healing not only tested his willpower, but also his psychokinesis. It consumed twice as much energy as using God's power. He used his psychokinesis to circulate in her body and was surprised to find that her damaged meridians were recovering automatically. Moreover, the speed of recovery was even faster than when he used his psychokinesis to help her recover. Could it be that he had used his God's power to stimulate the mysterious power in her body? Shinjoli heaved a sigh of relief and slowly withdrew his hand. He then helped her to fix her messy clothes. Since she had started to recover automatically, he could no longer participate in it. Otherwise, the recovery speed of the two forces would be different due to the difference in speed. She might even go crazy because of this. What he needed to do now was to stay by her side and check on her recovery speed from time to time. If he found something wrong, he could make some adjustments. She was lying on the white jade bed as if she was sleeping soundly. He sat beside her and looked at her. He was holding one of her hands the whole time. Perhaps they were really deeply in love with each other. He could only stay by her side quietly for this moment. After that, they would go their separate ways and live their own lives. As for this incident, he needed to know the truth and give her an explanation. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. After 6 hours, the door of the quiet room finally opened. Shinjuli slowly walked out from inside. His face was extremely pale, but his steps were still very steady. A red shadow flashed. Shuilan floated down and landed directly in front of him. He stared straight into Shinjuli's eyes and asked, "How is it? Is she okay?" His voice was slightly trembling. He was afraid that something bad would come out of Shinjuli's mouth. She should be fine. Shinjuli was a man of few words. He paused and threw out a medicine bottle. "This is the pill she should take every day. Let her take 3 pills every morning." After that, he turned around and disappeared. Shuilan, this person left too straightforwardly. He didn't even have time to ask the question in his heart. Forget it. Those were all secondary. As long as she could survive, as long as she was fine, everything else was fleeting. Lizine had already been moved back to the small courtyard she used to live in. Although she was unconscious, she was blind and crippled. She would tremble from the pain from time to time, so she needed someone to take care of her. So Yelu Jing, and still sent 2 female disciples to wait on her. It was not easy to take care of this kind of patient. She had to wipe its sweat from time to time to prevent the sweat from flowing into the wound and causing infection. It was already the middle of the night, and the 2 disciples were a little tired. One of them was taking a nap on a small bed in the outer room, while the other was dozing off on Luzine's cloud bed. The lights dimmed, and another person suddenly appeared in the room. The female disciple, who was dozing off, opened her eyes in a daze and jumped in fright. He fell to his knees. "Di Zun." She was simply too shocked, so she kowtowed especially loudly. She accidentally knocked her head so hard that she got a bump. An ancestor had unexpectedly broken into this small courtyard in the middle of the night. This had never happened before. She had served Lizine in this courtyard for so many years, but she had never seen Di Zun. "Get out." The ancestor only said 2 words. The disciple didn't say anything else and immediately agreed. She kowtowed again and left, dragging her companion out of the room along with her. Before she left, she didn't forget to close the door for the ancestor. Shinjuli stood in front of Luzine's bed. Chapter 1497. After half a day of recuperation, the fur on its body no longer looked as dull as before. It was a bit brighter. Its injuries weren't light and it was still unconscious. If he waited for it to wake up normally, he might have to wait a day, but he didn't want to wait a moment longer. The truth. He urgently needed to know the truth. When he came out of seclusion, Yelu Jing, and had reported to him that Lizine had gone to the Forbidden Land to gather herbs for him. He didn't take it to heart at that time. This Forbidden Land was located in the sky above Heavenly Book Mountain. There were herbs everywhere, and there was indeed lightning avoidance grass that could cure lightning tribulations. However, since he had already prepared to block lightning tribulations for Lizine, he naturally considered this step. He had already prepared these herbs, so there was no need for Lizine to interfere. However, since she had already been gone for a day and a night, then let her be. After all, although there were some ferocious guardian beasts in the Forbidden Land, their levels weren't too high. With Lizine's martial arts, it was enough to deal with them. The Forbidden Land wasn't close to the Sun Moon sect. With Lizine's speed, it was already not bad if she could return in 2 days. Therefore, in his opinion, it was normal for Lizine to go missing for a day and a night. There was nothing to worry about. As for Ning Xuema was the only one that made him a bit worried. Although he knew that they weren't fated and that he shouldn't miss her, reason couldn't completely control his emotions. He still couldn't help but want to know how she was doing. Originally, he still needed to go into seclusion for 2 more days to fully recover. However, in the later stages of his seclusion, he didn't know why he was so impatient and flustered. It was as if something important in his life was disappearing. This was the first time he felt this way. He subconsciously tried to calculate, but he didn't get anything. In this world, the only person he couldn't calculate was Ning Xuema. His first feeling was that something had happened to Ning Xuema. This time he couldn't stay calm and immediately contacted Yelu Jing and reported that Helian Shao, who was sent to Phoenix City, had a small accident. He didn't know what Forbidden Land he had accidentally entered, but he encountered a ghost wall. He came out after a day and a night and was now on the way to Phoenix City. However, the disciples of Phoenix City didn't see Ning Xuema, so he sent people to search along the way. In other words, Ning Xuema was missing. After receiving this news, Shinjuli became even more impatient. Back then, when he was helping Ning Xuema to expel the devil from her body, in order to protect her soul from being harmed, he had separated a part of his soul from her. Later on, she left with Shuilan with hatred, and he did not take back that part of his soul. With that soul in her body, he could still sense her. Although he couldn't sense her emotions as long as she was on this continent, he could sense her general location. He immediately focused his senses and sensed, but to his surprise, he discovered that Ning Xuema was actually in the direction of the Heavenly Book Mountain. If she wanted to go to Phoenix City, she would not have passed through Heavenly Book Mountain. Why did she suddenly go to Heavenly Book Mountain? Could it be that he needed to collect some herbs? He knew that Ning Xuema was extremely smart and quick-witted. That disciple who was following her had most likely been detected by her. In order to confuse that disciple, she deliberately flew in the direction of Phoenix City, but she changed her direction not long after flying. That was how she got rid of the disciple sent by Yelu Jingyan. No one knew the dangers of Heavenly Book Mountain better than Shinjuli, especially those spirit beasts on the 9th peak. Even an Earth rank level 9 would be in danger at every step. Chapter 1498. When he thought of his inexplicable panic, he became even more impatient. Therefore he immediately set off and in the end he witnessed such a cruel scene. At that time he was so angry that he didn't think much about it. After he came back from the rescue, he was so busy that he didn't have time to think. It was only when he was guarding Ning Xuema that he really calmed down and thought about it. The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. The more he thought about it, the colder his limbs became. Ning Xuema was pregnant. With her personality, she would definitely treat the child as a treasure. For the sake of the baby in her womb, she wouldn't purposely find trouble with Lizine, whose psychokinesis was higher than hers. Moreover, only Yelu Jing knew that Lizine went to the Forbidden Land of spiritual herbs. Ning Xuema shouldn't have any channels to know about this. Naturally, she wouldn't purposely go to Tianshu Mountain to find trouble with Lizine. At first, he thought that the two of them just met on a narrow path. Now, it seemed that things were far from that simple. It was highly likely that Lizine took the initiative to find trouble with Ning Xuema. If he wanted to find out the truth quickly, he could only find Lizine. Therefore, he rushed back in the middle of the night and went to her room. He looked down at the 9-tailed fox on the bed. Lizine seemed to still be unconscious. Her body trembled from time to time and she groaned in pain. Obviously, even if she was unconscious, she still felt pain. Shinjuli paused. He couldn't wait any longer. He reached out his hand and was about to use spells to wake her up when he suddenly paused. After looking at her for a moment, he suddenly said, "You don't have to pretend anymore. I know you're awake." Luzine's body trembled and her ears trembled. She couldn't open her eyes anymore. She turned her head and faced Shinjuli's direction. She groaned again as if she was crying out her grievances. However, her tongue was gone and her abdomen was pierced. She had just repaired it so she couldn't speak ventriloquism. 2 drops of blood dripped from her eyes as if they were tears. She looked very miserable, but Shinjuli was unmoved. He slowly said, "Let me ask you, how did you meet Ning Xuema?" Luzine's body stiffened. She couldn't say a word. She whimpered and cried even more profusely. Shinjuli narrowed his eyes slightly. "I need to know the truth. Since you can't speak now, let me read your memories." This sentence caused Luzine's entire body to freeze. It was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, it shrank back and shook its head desperately. It endured the sharp pain in its abdomen and spoke in ventriloquism, "No need. I can write with my hand." Its claws had been reattached. Although it could not use its power, it could still write. It was afraid that Shinjuli would read its memories and obtain information, so it ignored the pain all over its body. With a flash of light, it was about to return to its human form so that it could write. However, just as the light on its body flickered, it felt a sudden chill on its forehead. A finger was placed between its eyebrows. His fingers were so cold that Luzine couldn't help but shiver. Her nose was filled with Shinjuli's unique light fragrance. Luzine originally wanted to get close to him, but now she was so scared that her whole body trembled. She didn't expect Shinjuli to have this ability. Reading memories. Once he read her memories, wouldn't all her secrets be exposed? Woo-woo. She wanted to shake her head violently, but Shinjuli's fingers seemed to have fixed her in place. She couldn't move at all. Chapter 1499. It felt a sharp pain in its forehead. It could feel that everything related to Ning Xuema was frantically flying out of its mind. Shinjuli didn't read people's memories easily. Although this was the fastest way to find out the truth, it wasn't challenging at all. If he found out everything through reading people's memories, it would be much less fun. His life was endless. In his long and boring life, he needed to cultivate some fun. It wouldn't be good if this fun was taken away. Unless he was anxious to find out the truth, he wouldn't use this method. He also didn't remember when he had been criticized by others when he used this method. It seemed that he had angered them and left a strong psychological shadow in his heart. Even when he woke up again this time, he didn't rely on reading other people's memories to recover his own memories. He had been watching Luzine's reaction. Therefore, Luzine's every little action fell into his eyes. She was obviously feeling guilty. She obviously wanted to lie. Then why should he be polite? He immediately used the technique to read her memories. Of course, he only took a portion of her memories. It started after the tribulation. He saw that after the tribulation, Luzine was recuperating in the small courtyard. Every day she would ask about him 7 to 8 times. He saw that after her injuries were more or less healed, she walked around in the house alone with a heavy heart. He saw that she came out for a walk and accidentally saw Yelu Jing and Helian Xiao talking together. He heard that Ning Xuema was heading to Phoenix City. He saw that she walked away thoughtfully and returned to her own house to take a few things. Then she came out and told Yelu Jing, and that she was going to look for medicine for her master. He saw that after she left the Sun Moon sect, she quickly caught up with Helian Xiao and set up a trap in front of him. She made Helian Xiao fall into the illusion of the Sea of Clouds. He saw that she forced Helian Xiao's soul out of the illusion of the Sea of Clouds and used a technique to depict his actions and the way he spoke. In the end, she made Helian Xiao unconscious and trapped him somewhere. Then she secretly caught up with Ning Xuema, who was flying on her sword. When he saw Ning Xuema in Luzine's memories, Shinjuli's fingers trembled slightly. At that time, Ning Xuema's face was extremely pale, but her eyes were extremely bright. From time to time she would caress her abdomen and murmur, "Baby, mommy will take you to eat good food. I will definitely let you eat the best food and grow strong. Your father doesn't want you anymore. Mommy will dote on you twice as much. I won't let you feel like a child without a father. Baby, I'm sorry. Mommy wasn't strong enough. I fell sick just because of a little shock. You suffered because of me. But mommy loves you very much. You didn't take any medicine even when you had such a high fever. Mommy's physical cooling is also good. After soaking in the bath for a few days, my skin was about to cramp. But I finally got through it. It's just that the staff there must be wondering why I'm bathing so frequently. They might even think that mommy is sick. Ah, mommy is sick, she's sick in love with her son. Her face was full of motherly radiance as she chatted with the baby in her stomach. When he saw this, Shinjuli's face was already pale. Who exactly was the father of the child in her stomach? If it was Shuilan's, how could he not want to have the child? He faintly guessed something in his heart, but he didn't dare to believe it. When he heard her say physical cooling, he seemed to have understood something. His heart couldn't help but twist. So, she had fallen sick in that poor little town, she had fallen seriously ill in that poor place, and there wasn't even anyone by her side to take care of her. Chapter 1500. She was seriously ill in such a poor place, and there was no one around to take care of her. She could only rely on baths to cool herself down. How helpless must she have been at that time? That damned spy actually didn't see through her. He only said that she lived in seclusion and liked to bathe. He even said that when he saw her occasionally, he saw her walking gracefully and her complexion wasn't bad. That's right, she had to be strong and had the identity of a demon king. If she showed any signs of weakness, she was afraid that she would be hunted down by the celestial cultivation sect. Therefore she had to be strong. Shuema. Shuema. Shinjuli's fingertips, which were pressed on Luzine's forehead, were already turning white. Then he saw Luzine muttering viciously to herself, I definitely can't let you give birth to this child. Otherwise I won't have any hope. He then saw Luzine rushing in front of Ning Shuema and setting up a poisonous enchantment. Ning Shuema was obviously absent-minded as she barged into the enchantment. Shinjuli's fingers began to tremble. He was a medical expert. Although Luzine's poison was extremely secretive, she couldn't hide it from his eyes. This kind of poison was nothing to ordinary people, but it had an extremely strong abortion effect. Luzine was indeed plotting against Ning Shuema's child. He already knew what kind of feelings Luzine had for him. However, since he didn't have any feelings for her, he naturally treated her feelings as nothing. He had already fulfilled his promise by blocking the lightning tribulation for her. There was no need to get involved with her anymore. He thought that he had made everything clear and that Luzine had also understood. However, he didn't expect that she didn't give up at all. She actually plotted against Ning Shuema. Why did she plot against Ning Shuema's child? Could it be that the child? Shinjuli didn't dare to think further. His heart seemed to have sunk into the abyss. The finger pressing on Luzine's forehead trembled so much that it almost slipped off. As the memories flashed in his mind, Shinjuli's face turned paler and paler. When he saw Luzine transforming into Hellion Shao to trick Ning Shuema into eating the falling blossom peach, his fingers turned cold. He couldn't wait to walk into the scene and knock the falling baby peach out of Ning Shuema's hand. Fortunately, Ning Shuema was smart enough to see through Luzine's scheme and expose her identity in time. To Shinjuli, what happened after that was no different from being struck by lightning from the ninth heaven. That child was actually his own. Although he didn't know what Ning Shuema had gone through in the past 10 years, he still understood Luzine's supernatural ability. He knew that she had a pair of X-ray eyes and he had even experienced it himself. It was indeed magical. However, he didn't expect that she would know that Ning Shuema's child was his. Instead of telling him, she directly schemed against Ning Shuema. Luzine's memories were still surging in his mind. Shinjuli's face turned pale as he watched Ning Shuema desperately trying to protect the child and fighting a battle of wits and courage with Luzine. He watched as she sat on a huge rock and used her psychokinesis to protect the child. He watched as her eyes stared blankly. She was obviously scared to death, but her fingers were moving very quickly. She kept muttering to herself, hopelessly begging the baby in her womb to be strong and not leave her. Shinjuli felt as if a few knives were stabbing into his heart, but he could only watch as she helplessly worked. When the blood came out from under her skirt, he saw her frozen in place. She looked as if the whole world was leaving her. Shinjuli's heart felt as if it had fallen into hell. Blood gushed out from under her skirt, and she could only work in vain and mechanically. Chapter 1501. Blood gushed out from under her dress as she worked in vain like a robot. She was like a wooden doll that had been beaten into a pulp, but she was still holding onto a sliver of hope. He even saw her using a very thick silver needle to stab a certain acupuncture point on her body. That acupuncture point was used to protect the fetus, but it was several times more painful than other acupuncture points. However, she kept stabbing as if she didn't feel pain, trying to keep the baby, until the last moment, a small ball of flesh rolled out from under her dress. She was trembling like a fallen leaf in the wind. She held the small ball of flesh in her palm, and her eyes were dark and full of despair. Her dress was stained with blood, but she was as pale as a ghost. Shinjuli's face was also as pale as a ghost at this moment. This was obviously Lu Xin's memory, but he could also feel Ning Xuema's overwhelming despair and sadness in this memory. That kind of despair and sadness seemed to be shared by heaven and earth. The flowers withered at that moment, and the chill spread like a tide. At that moment, Ning Xuema turned into a demon. After some time, Xinjiuli's finger that was pressed between Lu Xin's eyebrows finally slid down slowly. His face was frighteningly pale and he stood there motionlessly. He lowered his head to look at his hand, and his fingers were twitching. No wonder Ning Xuema would fight with Lu Xin. So this was the reason. And what about him? What did he do? He injured her, who had just had a miscarriage, and then left her, who was on the verge of death, with the enemy who killed their child. Xinjiuli, I hate you. This was the last thing she said to him. He didn't think much of it at that time, but now he finally understood how much she wanted to cry for him. He treated her enemy, but he caused her to struggle on the verge of death, and she was on the verge of death several times. She was his wife. The wife who was pregnant with his baby. She must have wanted to give him a surprise when she came back with the baby, but she didn't expect to hear his engagement ceremony. Ning Xuema's words when she came to the engagement ceremony seemed to ring in his ears. Xinjiuli, do you really want to marry her? She had always been strong and proud. Was she trying to get him back by asking that question? However, he had directly said, it has nothing to do with you, which had directly killed all her hopes. When he blocked the lightning tribulation for that woman, she went down the mountain alone in despair. That woman was only slightly injured, but he sent 2 of his disciples to take care of her carefully, and ate all kinds of delicacies every day. His wife, who was pregnant with his child, had a high fever in a poor and run-down city, and no one cared about her. She wanted to eat a good meal for her child, and she had to travel to another city. In the end, he even injured her for the sake of that woman, who not only had a miscarriage but also used a forbidden technique, causing her to bleed profusely. Ning Xuema, the woman he loved wholeheartedly. He had always thought that he had never let her down and had always had a clear conscience, but it turned out that he had already caused her so much irreparable harm. Xinjiuli's fingers were trembling, and his whole body was shaking uncontrollably. What had he done? His vision turned black and there was blood boiling in his chest. Even the iron of Jiuzhou couldn't cast the word regret in his heart. Layers of regret surged in his chest like a tidal wave, and finally, it rushed up to his throat, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Lu Xin knew that it was over the moment his fingers left her body. She was terrified. Chapter 1502. Although she couldn't see Xinjiuli's expression, she could still sense what was going on around her. She could feel that the temperature around her was dropping rapidly. The majestic murderous aura coming from him made all the fur on her body stand up and her whole body tremble. The strong pressure made it so that she couldn't even raise her head. No, she had to do something. Otherwise she might be beaten to death. She couldn't care less about the pain in her stomach from talking. She tried her best to speak. Brother D, please don't be angry. I know I'm wrong. I didn't want to kill her. I just wanted to get rid of the child in her stomach. Bang. Before Lu Xin could finish her sentence, she was swept away by a strong gust of wind. She smashed into the wall and slid down. The soft couch under her body was smashed into pieces. She couldn't even see its original shape. This caused the wounds that Lu Xin tried so hard to heal to reopen. Her vision turned black and she almost fainted. Blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Lu Xin, I didn't do anything wrong to you. Why did you scheme against her? Why did you scheme against my child? Xinjiuli's voice came from above her head. Lu Xin crawled towards him with trembling claws. Brother D, you misunderstood. I didn't want to harm you. You couldn't forget her all these years. When you were unconscious, you often called her name in your dreams. That woman caused you so much trouble. I didn't want her to bother you anymore. I was afraid that she would use the child to threaten you and force you to do this and that, so I took the risk to scheme against her. I didn't want to kill her. Before her claws touched the corner of Xinjiuli's robe, he waved his sleeve and swatted her away like he was swatting away a fly. With a bang she hit the wall again. How dare you interfere in my affairs? Lu Xin, you're courting death. Xinjiuli's tone was cold and icy. You harmed her child. She hurt your body. You've harmed my wife and child, so I'll destroy your soul. Xinjiuli clenched his fist in the air, and Lu Xin's body seemed to be lifted up by an invisible hand. In the next moment, as long as a white light appeared in his palm, 10 Lu Xians would be killed. Even his soul couldn't reincarnate. Lu Xin was so frightened that she screamed, Brother D, Xin knows her mistake. Xin would never dare to do it again. Zine had already been punished, hadn't she? I beg you to spare Zine this time on account of my father saving your life. Shinjuli looked at the nine-tailed fox that was hanging upside down and dripping with blood. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Lizine, your father entrusted you to me before he passed away. I promised to help you overcome the lightning tribulation and cure your old illness. Now that I have fulfilled my promise, I don't owe you anything anymore. However, you harmed my wife and child. You must pay for this. He slowly clenched his fist. Lizine's body felt as if it was being bound by an invisible iron hoop, causing her head to swell. If she still had eyes, her eyeballs would have been squeezed out. She couldn't speak anymore. Only her four limbs and tail were left trembling and spasming. All the wounds on her body had opened up, and it was several times more painful than before. Knowing that it was futile, she gave up on struggling. So be it. Her body was already in such a bad state. She had hoped that Shinjuli, who was omnipotent, would be able to change her eyes, reattach her tongue, heal her wounds, and restore her to her original state. Chapter 1503. She even had a secret hope in her heart. She hoped that Shinjuli would treat her well out of guilt. Not only would he heal her, but he would also not chase her away. She might even be able to benefit from this disaster and stay by Shinjuli's side for a long time to become his woman. But now everything was hopeless. Even if he did not kill her, he would not heal her. She would rather die than live in such a miserable state. Just when she could no longer breathe, the invisible iron hoop around her suddenly loosened. She fell to the ground and raised her head in panic. I won't kill you. Shinjuli's voice was cold. Hearing this, Lizine did not feel relieved at all. She wanted to speak again, but her abdomen was injured again. She could not even speak. I will order people to send you back to Jade Water and announce your true identity. Take care of yourself. Shinjuli did not look at her again and turned to leave. Lizine was scared out of her wits. The foxes in Jade Water valued family the most and cared a lot for the little foxes. If they knew that she was the one who caused all the female foxes to miscarry, she was afraid that they would skin her alive. She clearly remembered that she had used that poison technique at the very end in Jade Water, causing the children of several Fox clan elders to die an unnatural death. Those Fox clan elders had sworn with bloodshot eyes that they would skin the culprit alive once they caught her. No. If that was the case, she might as well die now. She struggled to get up and clenched her teeth. Using the last bit of her vital core, she desperately tried to hit the wall. Poof. She did not hit the wall but hit a soft enchantment. Her heart sank and she raised her head. She heard a soft sigh. Lizine, you brought this upon yourself. Lizine whimpered and shrank back. She could already tell that the voice belonged to Yelu Jing, and also felt very miserable. He was summoned by his master in the middle of the night. After giving him a few instructions, his master turned and left. Now he had to clean up this mess. A few days ago, his master had instructed him to send Lizine back to the country of Jade Water after she had passed the lightning tribulation and recovered from her injuries. He also planned to have some fun in the country of Jade Water and see other fox spirits. Who would have thought? He didn't expect Lizine, who always liked to smile and looked like a fairy, to be such a woman. She had once done such a thing. This caused his good impression of her to drop to the negatives. Before his master left, he had instructed him to send Lizine back alive. Naturally, he couldn't let this woman commit suicide here, although Yelu Jing didn't know what had happened during this period of time, but since master had saved her and treated her with great care, and then heavily injured her to this extent, and even gave such a strict order, then she must have done something that angered both man and God and angered Master, Lizine. To be able to infuriate my master and make him give such a cruel order, you are really capable. Yelu Jing didn't care about Liziyin's desperate struggle as he casually placed it into a box and brought it out. He always carried out his master's orders to the letter. What awaited Liziyin was another round of severe punishment. Yelu Jing could almost foresee Liziyin's tragic future. He knocked on the box floating beside him and sighed. I really think that you would be better off dead. This woman was really blind. Of all the people she could offend, she just had to offend his master. He had to finish this task quickly. When he returned, there was an even bigger task waiting for him. Chapter 1504. Master told him to prepare a wedding and he only gave him 6 words. The grandest, the grandest. In just a few words, it showed how much importance Master placed on this wedding. Master's attitude was completely different from when he told him to prepare an engagement banquet. He vaguely guessed something in his heart and became excited. Could it be? Little junior sister was finally coming back. Woo-woo. A muffled sound came from the box that was enveloped by psychokinesis. It was obvious that Luzine was extremely uncomfortable inside. She was seriously injured now and she was traveling in the sky where she couldn't breathe. She could only rely on the air produced by his box to breathe. His psychokinesis was limited, and it was already good enough that he could protect the box. He didn't have the extra strength to produce enough air for her, so she could only endure it even if she was suffocating inside. However, Master had told him not to let her die. He had to let her live to receive the punishment that she deserved. She would live at least for 10 years. But the injuries on her body would never heal. She would always experience the pain of not being able to live and not being able to die. She would never be free. No one in this world dared to go against Dizun's decree. He believed that the Jade Water Fox clan wouldn't dare to either. Shinjuli was flying towards the capital of Chongkong country, his speed as fast as a shooting star. His heart was beating fast in his chest, sweet and sour at the same time. It was as if there was a pot of boiling water in his chest that was going to boil at any time. She loved him. Otherwise she wouldn't have kept this child his child. If he hadn't read Luzine's memory he wouldn't have believed it. He was the only god in this world. He was the strongest and had the highest magical power, but he also had a fatal weakness. The power of a god was too strong, so it was not easy for him to conceive a child. Even if he married a high-level deity, she might not be able to conceive a child for him after 8 to 10,000 years. He didn't expect that Ning Xuema, who was only at Earth rank level 9, could do it. His child. That was his child. If he knew that she was pregnant with his child, he wouldn't have let her go no matter what. He would have kept her by his side even if he had to use the method of confinement. He was really a bastard. That was obviously his wife, obviously his person, but he actually almost gave her away. Xuema, wait for me. I'm coming to take you home. I will make it up to you. I will do my best to make it up to you. I won't let you get hurt again. The voice transmission talisman at his waist suddenly lit up. He looked down and saw a bright red light flashing. His heart sank. It was a message from Shui Yilan. When he left the last time he was afraid that Ning Xuema would have another accident, so when he gave Shui Yilan the medicine bottle, he also gave him a sound-transmitting talisman so that he could contact him if he was in trouble. Looking at the flashing blood-red sound-transmitting talisman, Shinjuli was stunned for a moment. Could it be? Something happened to Ning Xuema? He took a deep breath and picked up the sound-transmitting talisman with trembling hands. Shui Yilan's exasperated voice came from the other side. Shinjuli, how did you treat her? Something happened to her. Shinjuli's expression changed. He almost fell from the cloud. What happened to her? She doesn't recognize people anymore. I can't say. Come and see her. She doesn't recognize people anymore? Amnesia? Shinjuli almost couldn't catch his breath. She couldn't have lost her memory like him, right? It didn't matter. Whether she lost her memory or not, he wouldn't let her leave his side again. At most, he would chase her back. Chapter 1505. Shinjuli had originally planned on making a trip to Heavenly Book Mountain to summon the soul of his child, but now he had to go and see his child's mother first. In reality, Ning Xuema's situation was far worse than Shinjuli had imagined. She really had woken up, but her wide-open eyes were unfocused. When Shinjuli arrived, Shui Yilan was circling Ning Xuema, calling out to her, but she did not respond. Seeing Shinjuli come in, he jumped up, his dark green eyes turning scarlet. He reached out to pull at Shinjuli's clothes. Bastard, just what kind of curse did you cast on her body? Shinjuli brushed him aside with his sleeve and sat down by Ning Xuema's side. Without another word he took her hand and checked her pulse. Although her pulse was weak, it could be considered normal. There was nothing wrong with it. Moreover, from her appearance she should have woken up, but no matter how he called out to her, she would not respond. It was as if she had lost her soul and had become a wooden puppet. She was also very obedient, allowing Shinjuli to move her around. When he told her to open her mouth, she opened her mouth. When he told her to stretch out her hand, she stretched out her hand. She had no intention of resisting. However, her originally lively eyes were dark and deathly still. It was as if they were an icy wasteland devoid of any green. Shinjuli examined her soul. Her 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls were all there. Not a single one was missing. She was not suffering from a soulless illness. Just what is going on? Did she lose too much blood and hurt her brain? Shui Yilan raised his suspicions. Shinjuli ignored him. At this time he could not panic. He could not be confused. He had to calm down. Shinjuli suppressed his panic and busied himself around her. She was not suffering from a soulless illness or a lack of physical souls. There was also nothing wrong with her body. Even her brain was normal without any damage. There was not a single illness that he knew of that could be related to her. Then what was wrong with her? Shuema. Shinjuli stretched out his arms and hugged her tightly. His heart was filled with regret. She didn't move and let him hug her. She didn't push him away, nor did she respond. Her eyes were still staring blankly ahead. Shuilan was furious. Shinjuli, I asked you to treat her, not to take advantage of her. Shinjuli turned a deaf ear to Shuilan's scolding. He just hugged her, felt her soul aura. Time ticked by. 2 hours passed. 4 hours passed. The sky outside was already bright and the sun was just right. It was a rare sunny day suitable for hiking, traveling and having fun with friends. Inside the room, the two people's hearts were filled with dark clouds. Shuilan couldn't intervene, so he could only watch from the side. Shinjuli had been busy for a few hours, but there was still no effect. The once lively girl was now like a lifeless porcelain doll. She couldn't see anyone. Although she was still alive, she was no different from a dead person. What's wrong with her? Shuilan finally lost his patience. Shinjuli still didn't speak, but his hands and feet were a little cold. This was the first time he had seen this kind of illness. He was a god. Although his medical skills were excellent, he wouldn't treat people easily. If it was some complicated illness related to psychokinesis or injuries from practicing martial arts, it wouldn't be a problem for him. Even if she had lost her soul, he could still call her back. But this was not the case now. For the first time in his life he felt helpless. Her fragrant and soft body was in his arms, but it seemed to be thousands of miles away from him. Chapter 1506. No matter how hard he tried, he wasn't able to touch her soul. Shuema. Ning Shuema. Shuemo. Momo. He called out the name he had once called out, and he even used his telekinesis. Even if she was deaf, his voice would still reach the deepest part of her body and be received by her. But she didn't respond. She didn't even blink. Her eyes were wide open, empty. Shuilan steeled his heart. He took out a needle from somewhere and asked, "How about I stab her where it hurts the most?" "No need. It's useless." Shinjuli finally opened his golden mouth. He slowly bent down and picked her up, turned around and walked away. "Hey, where are you going?" Shuilan chased after him. "I'm taking her to see a doctor." Shinjuli was a man of action. As he spoke, he had already soared into the air. Shuilan naturally wasn't willing to be left behind. He also flew up. "Where do you want to see a doctor?" Was there anyone in this world who was better than Shinjuli in terms of medical skills? Carefree Island. Shinjuli spat out a few words. His feet moved and he flew even faster. Rongyue Tianlan often walked the human world and called himself the immortal doctor. He boasted that there was no illness in this world that he couldn't cure. He claimed that he could cure all difficult and complicated illnesses. Now he could only take Ning Shuema to find him. Hopefully he had a way. After all, Shuilan had been in the demon world for a long time. He naturally had some understanding of the characters of the immortal world. Therefore, although Rongyue Tianlan kept a low profile and almost never dealt with demons, he had still heard of him. The legendary immortal doctor might really be able to cure Momo. Although Shuilan's fighting skills were inferior to Shinjuli's, his running skills were still quite good. Shinjuli was extremely fast, but he was actually able to keep up with his footsteps. The two of them were originally destined to be enemies, but now, for the same woman, they had abandoned their former enmity and traveled together. "Give her to me." Shuilan impolitely extended his hand to Shinjuli. Since this god couldn't save Momo, then there was no need for him to look at his face and endure his tyranny. Shinjuli glanced at him indifferently. "Why should I give my people to you?" Shuilan was stunned and his expression changed. "What do you mean?" "I meant it literally," Shinjuli replied. "Bastard. What do you mean by your people? You don't deserve her at all. You're already engaged to another woman. You have no right to get her." Shuilan was furious. "There's no engagement and there's no other woman. She's the only woman I've ever had." "Nonsense. What's the matter with Luzine? Your engagement is known to the whole world. Momo has just returned and she already hears about it. How can she endure this?" Shuilan was furious. No one knew Ning Shuema's feelings for Shinjuli better than him. When that silly girl was with him, she would often be lost in thought. When she saw a man in a white robe on the street, her gaze would uncontrollably follow him for a long time. At that time, although she never said anything and even deliberately looked happy, he could see the unhappiness in her eyes. He saw the kind of unforgettable yearning that she couldn't forget even if she wanted to. Occasionally in her dreams she would call out to the great god. When she called out to him, she would stubbornly raise the corner of her mouth, but tears would often seep out from the corners of her eyes. Shui Yilan, who was secretly observing her, felt as if a basin of boiling water had been poured over his heart. It was as if he was scalded. That boiling water instantly turned cold, so cold that his heart couldn't help but tighten. Chapter 1507. On the surface, she looked happy and carefree, as if she had walked out of her gloominess. However, her heart was always empty. She agreed to try with Shui Yilan, but every time he deliberately got close to her, she would subconsciously avoid him. When he hugged her waist, her body would stiffen. She was lost in thought more than she was happy. Shui Yilan had tasted this kind of lovesickness before, so he naturally understood what this meant. She was lovesick. However, the person she was lovesick for was never Shui Yilan. It was like this in the previous life and it was still like this in this life. No matter how much that person hurt her, no matter how much she hated that person, it had nothing to do with Shui Yilan. He couldn't even be the person she hated the most. Whether it was love or hate, she was happy, angry, sad, or happy for the same person. She was extraordinarily stubborn when it came to relationships. This made Shui Yilan gnash his teeth in hatred, but he also felt a little sad. Wasn't he also stubborn? Was this fate? He couldn't let go of her and was crazy for her. However, she couldn't let go of another man, and was heartbroken for that man. Because he knew Ning Xuema's feelings, when Shui Yilan returned 10 years ago and heard that Xinjiuli was engaged and Ning Xuema used a dance to send him off, his first reaction was heartache. He knew that the girl would definitely suffer a heavy blow because of this. After leaving the Sun Moon sect, he didn't know where she would hide to recover. Therefore he frantically searched for her. It wasn't to obtain her, but to be by her side, to give her a shoulder to lean on when she was the saddest. However, he didn't expect that he would find her so heavily injured. Which bastard hurt her? If I find out who it was, I will definitely tear him to pieces. Shui Yilan said fiercely. Xinjiuli's expression changed slightly. Looking at Ning Xuema in his arms, he felt as if a knife was slowly stirring in his heart. The one who hurt her the most was him, and the one who caused her to be like this was him. He was clearly the most important person to her, but he hurt her so deeply. He didn't dare to imagine how Lazine felt when he left with her. Xinjiuli, you'll regret it. You'll regret treating me like this. These were the last words she said to him. He didn't look back at that time, so he didn't see her expression, but he could imagine it now. How desperate did she have to be to say those words? Yes, he regretted it. He had long regretted it. He was so regretful that he wished he could turn back time and stab himself a few more times. He took a deep breath. At this moment he naturally could not tell Shui Yilan the truth. Otherwise this red-coat bastard would definitely fight him to the death. He wasn't afraid of fighting Shui Yilan. If Shui Yilan beat him up because of this, he would rather not fight back. However, right now treating Ning Xuema was more important. Everything else had to be put aside. Where have you been for the past 10 years? What happened? Xinjiuli finally asked the question in his heart. He didn't dare to ask this question before, but now he finally asked it openly. Shui Yilan obviously didn't buy his words. What does it have to do with you where we've been? It's none of your business. Xinjiuli glanced at him. If he didn't know about this child and heard Shui Yilan's answer, he most likely wouldn't ask any more. However, he was really curious now. Although he forced himself to let go and seemed to have forgotten about Ning Xuema on the surface, he often subconsciously traveled to different spaces. Chapter 1508. He still had a sliver of hope in his heart. He hoped that he could sense her and meet her by chance, however, he didn't. He had never met them. This made him feel even more hopeless. From time to time, there would be rumors from the demon realm that the two demon kings were already married. The two of them lived together when they were in the demon realm. Now the two of them went out to have fun. There were all kinds of rumors, but none of them could be confirmed. Every rumor was like a knife that stabbed into his heart. Therefore he forced himself to let go completely. Later on, there was a rumor from the demon realm that Shui Yilan didn't appear because he was seriously injured and his life was in danger. Because of this, when Ning Xuema appeared at his wedding, his first reaction was that she was here for Shui Yilan again. He didn't expect that everything was wrong. She was here for him. In her previous life she might have loved Shui Yilan, but in this life she loved him. If she really loved Shui Yilan she wouldn't keep the child. She was a doctor herself. If she didn't want to keep the child she had many ways to do so. Therefore, since he knew what she was thinking, he didn't want to let go no matter what. Even if she wanted to cut him with a knife after she woke up, he didn't care. He also had his own pride. If she had always loved someone else he would let her go. If she loved him he wouldn't let anyone else take advantage of her. Shui Yilan, the child in her stomach is mine. Xinjiuli calmly threw out such a bomb. Shui Yilan staggered and almost fell from the cloud. What nonsense are you talking about? This year you and her have. How dare you let her down and get engaged to another woman? Shui Yilan was furious. I just found out. At the engagement party, I met her for the first time after 10 years. That's not right. Momo's child is only 3 or 4 months old. You haven't seen her before. How could it be yours? Shui Yilan looked at him as if he was looking at a monster. That's what I'm wondering too. This child is mine, but we were indeed separated for 10 years. That's why I'm asking you about the past 10 years. Shui Yilan coldly snorted. Why should I tell you? Besides, do you think the child is yours just because you say so? I'll only believe it if Momo says it herself after she wakes up. Shui Yilan, some strange things have happened to her in the past 10 years. Perhaps this is the main reason for her strange illness. If you tell us, the doctors will be able to prescribe the right medicine. Xinjiuli's words clearly poked at Shui Yilan's weak spot. He paused, took a deep breath and coldly said, 10 years ago she and I accidentally entered a barren land and had a few words. She left by herself. When I chased after her, I could only watch as she was swallowed by a strange black hole. Shui Yilan still didn't know what happened between Ning Xuema and Xinjiuli. He also didn't know whether the child was real or not. Therefore he didn't want to tell Xinjiuli the truth. What if the child in Momo's stomach was someone else? If Xinjiuli knew the cause of Shui Yimo's death in his previous life, wouldn't he be even more unwilling to let go of Momo? Moreover, this great god had a fiancée in the Sun Moon sect. Even if his Momo liked Xinjiuli, she wouldn't be able to accept this. His Momo deserved to be treated as the only one, and Xinjiuli obviously didn't deserve it. Besides, Shui Yilan wasn't ready to let go before he confirmed Ning Xuema's feelings. Chapter 1509. Moreover, Shui Yilan wasn't prepared to let go of Ning Xuema before he could determine her feelings. He had persisted for 2 lifetimes. He wasn't someone who would easily give up now. Xinjiuli naturally didn't know that he was hiding the truth. His attention had been drawn to that black hole. He often walked there, so he naturally knew of that black hole. It was a famous place where those who entered never returned. Ning Xuema had actually been swallowed by that black hole? Xinjiuli's hands and feet turned cold. He angrily glared at Shui Yilan. If she was lost in there, why didn't you come to find me? Find you? Xinjiuli, don't tell me you went into that black hole. Also, after that black hole swallowed her, it immediately disappeared. I also wanted to jump in, but I ended up jumping into thin air. I've been looking for this black hole for all these years, but I haven't been able to find it. Shui Yilan didn't plan on mentioning how he had gotten lost. He didn't want to ruin his image in front of his love rival. So, you separated 10 years ago? Nonsense. Xinjiuli looked down at Ning Xuema in his arms. A thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Could it be that time in that black hole world was slower than here? A day in that world was a year here? Or perhaps it was a similar time system. She might have only stayed in that black hole for 1 or 2 months, so the child in her belly was only 3 or 4 months old. But here, 10 years had already passed. He could only wait for her to completely wake up before he could obtain an answer. Xinjiuli closed his eyes. His speed suddenly increased. As he flew, he suddenly used the distance shrinking technique. Shui Yilan wasn't prepared for this and was immediately pulled away. Shui Yilan could only watch on helplessly as Xinjiuli disappeared in front of him. The only thing left in the air was the words that almost made Shui Yilan stomp his feet. Shui Yilan, you can leave now. Shui Yilan, this great divinity was burning the bridge after crossing it. He actually left him behind and ran away. Did he think he could leave him behind? Wasn't it just Carefree Island? It's not like I don't recognize him. Rong Yuetian looked at the supreme god descending from the sky and knocked her head with her fan. When she saw the person in his arms clearly, her head swelled even more. Rong Yuetianlan was a leisurely loose immortal. She had an elegant temperament and an undisciplined temperament. Although she lived on the Tianxi continent, she didn't care about the various immortals and devils on this continent. She lived a carefree and unfettered life. Of course, that was 2,000 years ago before he met the Divine Lord. Rongyue Tianlan had a hobby. He liked to hunt for treasures, but he didn't necessarily care about the treasures. What he liked was the process of searching for treasures. 2,000 years ago, when he was searching for treasures, he entered a mysterious cave. Before he could see any treasures, he was attacked by Wu Emo. Wu Emo sternly warned him to get lost as soon as possible, saying that this was not a place he could come to. Rongyue Tianlan had a stubborn temper. The more he was not allowed to enter a place, the more he wanted to enter. The more Wu Emo refused to let him enter, the more he believed that there must be a peerless treasure hidden in the cave. Generally, the value of the person or beast guarding the treasure was directly proportional to the value of the treasure. The more powerful the person guarding the treasure, the higher the value of the treasure. Wu Mo's martial arts couldn't be compared to those guardian beasts. He could be considered an expert among experts. Therefore, the treasure he was guarding must be a heaven-defying treasure. With this inference, Rongyue Tianlan defeated Wu Emo and pinned him there. Then he excitedly rushed into the depths of the cave. As a result, he saw the Supreme God lying on an ancient white jade bed. Chapter 15:10. The Supreme God was in a deep sleep and his body was covered with a faint white light. What made Rongyue Tianlan even more surprised was that the appearance of this sleeping handsome man was 99% similar to that of Wu Emo, who was fixed outside by her. Rongyue Tianlan thought that they were twins, one in a deep sleep and the other guarding. Although the Supreme God lying on the bed was unbelievably handsome, Rongyue Tianlan did not have any thoughts. Firstly, he was an extremely handsome man. He once thought that he was the most handsome immortal in the world. Secondly, his sexual orientation was very normal. He was not interested in handsome men no matter how beautiful they were. Therefore, he was a little disappointed when he saw that there was only one heaven-shaking, earth-shattering man on the ancient white jade bed. He spent so much effort to enter the treasure mountain, there was no reason for him to go out empty-handed. Therefore, he waved his fan and walked around the ancient white jade bed a few times. He planned to bring the ancient white jade bed home. He felt that the texture of the ancient bed was very good. He could bring it home to put some jars and jars of things. Of course, he was embarrassed to let the man on the jade bed sleep on the ground. Therefore, he planned to make an ancient rattan bed for him to sleep on when he took away the white jade bed. He was an immortal, so he was still very kind. He was embarrassed to do something so immoral. He did not expect that after he walked around the ancient bed twice and thought about which room to put the bed home, the Supreme God woke up. The Supreme God had just woken up from a dream and was still confused. Although he did not have any memory, his IQ was still very high. He could see that the man waving the fan in front of him was thinking about his bed. The more memories a person had, the more guarded they were against the outside world. They were also very rude to people who invaded their territory. Rongyue Tianlan did not take the Supreme God seriously at that time. According to his general inference, they were twins after all. The one outside was just SOSO, how strong could the one sleeping inside be? Therefore, the two of them did not agree and immediately fought. Therefore, Rongyue Tianlan finally realized how wrong his general inference was. The kung fu of the one inside and the one outside could not be mentioned in the same breath. Rongyue Tianlan was beaten up badly. Now that he thought about it, he felt bitter tears. It was from then on that he finally got to know the Supreme God. Because of a moment of greed, he became the Supreme God's follower. Fortunately, the Almighty was a man of character and didn't order him around much. He would only occasionally play chess with him, chat with him, or ask him to save someone. Overall, the Almighty still treated him as a friend. From then on, when the great god fell asleep again, Wu Emo was no longer the only one guarding him. There was also Rongyue Tianlan. Rongyue Tianlan focused on enjoyment, unlike Wu Emo, who was rigid and boring. Originally, when the great god was about to fall asleep, he would find a very remote corner where no one could find him. After knowing Rongyue Tianlan, the great god would come to find him every time he was about to fall asleep. Rongyue Tianlan would arrange for him to rest in a place within Carefree Island that was rich in spiritual strength and guaranteed not to be disturbed. She would protect him for 10 years. It was only when he woke up that she introduced herself to him, who had lost his memories, in a sincere and earnest manner. Of course, he also handed over the ancestor's memory record, which he had written in advance so that he could familiarize himself with it. The first 2 times the ancestor fell asleep, there were no accidents and everything was very peaceful. But he never thought that the 3rd time the ancestor would have such a great accident. Chapter 15:11. The sovereign had fallen into a coma 100 years in advance. When Rong Tianlan received the news from the sovereign and rushed over, the sovereign had nearly been incinerated in that land of flames. The injuries he received were not ordinary. Rong Yuishanlin used all of his strength and consumed countless pills and countless amounts of willpower to restore him to normal. After the sovereign fell into a normal coma, Rong Yuishanlin had consumed nearly 2/3 of his strength. His entire body was pale and he couldn't even maintain his carefree appearance. He could only have Yunshi, who was a guest at Carefree Island, help protect the sovereign while he went into seclusion to recover. He knew that the sovereign would wake up in 10 years, so he had set a time limit of 10 years for himself to leave seclusion. This way he wouldn't delay anything. What he didn't expect was that the sovereign would wake up 2 years early. What left him even more speechless was that because he had been too anxious to recover during his seclusion, his energy had diverged and he had fallen into a state of madness, falling into a coma. By the time he woke up, 10 years had passed. At that time he was paralyzed in his cave and couldn't leave. He had to cultivate for another 3 years before leaving. By the time he left seclusion, the sovereign's situation had already changed. Ning Xuema had entered the demonic path and disappeared with Shuilan. Shen Jiuli had brought back Lizine from the Jade Water Fox clan. It was rumored that the sovereign and Lizine had a good relationship and the two were often together. When Rong Yuishanlin heard this news, he didn't know whether he should be happy for the sovereign or sad for him. He was deeply aware that before the sovereign lost his memories, he had feelings for Ning Xuema. It wasn't just an ordinary affection. He had almost announced to the world that she was his wife. For her, he had risked his life and used forbidden techniques several times to save her. Rong Yuishanlin even suspected that Shinjiuli's early coma was related to his frequent use of forbidden techniques. As for Ning Xuema, Rong Yuishanlin also appreciated her. She was an extremely smart and strong girl. Her only flaw was that she had a bad fate. She was a cursed star and would easily bring bad luck to those around her. Rong Yuishanlin didn't know Ning Xuema's true identity. First, the sovereign's mouth was tight and he couldn't dig out any information. Secondly, Ning Xuema was very meticulous. He didn't know that she was a transmigrator. What he knew about the relationship between Shinjiuli and Ning Xuema was that Shinjiuli had risked his life for Ning Xuema several times. As for whether Ning Xuema loved Dizun or not, to be honest, he wasn't there most of the time, so he couldn't tell. Dizun was not a person who liked to share his emotions with his good friends. Therefore, Rong Tianlan did not know about the interactions between Dizun and Ning Xuema. He only knew that the ancestor cared a lot about Ning Xuema more than anyone else. When he came out of seclusion, Yunshi was a guest on his island. He could see that this lass was in a daze. Therefore he asked for the reason, and Yunshi told him about what had happened in the past few years. Yunshi was in despair. She thought that she would have a chance after Ning Xuema entered the demon realm and became a demon emperor. However, she didn't expect that Shinjiuli would treat her harshly after that. He didn't even allow her to go to Tianyin Peak as a guest. It was obvious that he had cut all ties with her. Yunshi was naturally unwilling to accept this result. She wanted to visit him several times, but she was afraid that she would offend him and cause him to fall out with her completely. Later she thought of a way to have a chance encounter with Dizun. However, she didn't expect that she would meet Dizun and a little vixen together. Dizun treated the little vixen well. He would get her whatever she wanted. Chapter 15:12. This scene dealt a heavy blow to Yunshi. After a few days of absent-mindedness, she began to inquire about Lizine and the sovereign. What she heard was similar to what Ning Xuema later heard. The sovereign was very good to this Lizine. He would occasionally take her out to play, and when they went out to play he would even buy her things. She also looked at Lizine from afar. She was a rare nine-tailed fox, and she looked like an immortal that was floating in the air. When the two of them stood together they looked very compatible. Thus, Yunshi became even more dispirited and ran to Carefree Island. After Rongyue Tianlan left seclusion, Yunshi naturally told him everything. She was pale and haggard, and as a good friend Rongyue Tianlan felt distressed. Now that things had developed to this point, Rongyue Tianlan had no choice but to seriously persuade Yunshi to let go. It was time to wake up from this dream. The scene of falling flowers falling in love but the heartless flowing water was a tragic one. It didn't suit her at all. Letting go in time was the way of the king. She didn't want to lose herself and become repulsive. Perhaps they wouldn't even be friends in the future. His persuasion didn't beat around the bush this time. To Yunshi it was no less than a wake-up call. She finally understood that whether or not Shinjiuli had Ning Xuema by his side, It was impossible for them to be together. Although this realization was cruel, it wasn't too late. She finally considered leaving. She promised Rongyue Tianlan that she would think about it and then leave. Rongyue Tianlan was very curious about the sovereign and the little fox after he lost his memories. Thus, he packed up and waved his fan as he went to visit. Xinjiuli naturally didn't recognize him. Luckily, the sovereign wasn't impulsive and didn't kick him out when he saw him. Besides, Rongyue Tianlan had several things that belonged to the sovereign. He had proof that they were friends. Moreover, they had a special sound-transmitting talisman. Thus, after some conversation, Xinjiuli recognized him as a friend. In truth, Rongyue Tianlan couldn't help but feel curious about the legendary little fox. Thus, he asked the sovereign about her in a roundabout way. The sovereign wasn't a talkative person. He only said, "She's cultivating and isn't on the mountain." Rongyue Tian only met Lizine half a year after that visit. There was no other reason other than Xinjiuli bringing her to see a doctor so that Rongyue Tianlan could see if there was a way. After Rongyue Tianlan's diagnosis, she came to a conclusion that Lizine had a weak disease in her womb. She had to undergo the lightning tribulation within 3,000 years of age. If she couldn't undergo the lightning tribulation in time, her soul would dissipate. This conclusion was the same as the ancestors. Rong Yuishinlin had also tested Lizine's telekinesis. Her aptitude was average, and she had only reached Earth Stage 9 after cultivating for nearly 3,000 years. There were only 5 years left before the deadline. In other words, if Lizine couldn't reach Heaven Stage 1 within 5 years, she wouldn't be able to pass the lightning tribulation. What awaited her was only death. It could be seen that Di Zun was very troubled by this matter. Rong Yu Tianlan steeled her heart and gave all the medicinal pills that could improve her skills to the little fox. She only hoped that she could be promoted in time to experience the thunder tribulation. However, the little fox didn't live up to expectations. Even after feeding her so many medicinal pills, it still didn't have much effect. The speed at which her skills improved was shockingly slow. In these few years, Rongyue Tianlan and the sovereign had tried all kinds of methods to help the little fox level up, but to no avail. In the blink of an eye, it was the last year of Lizine's life. It was also the 10th year of Ning Xuema's disappearance. Chapter 15-13. In the blink of an eye, it was the last year of Lizine's lifespan, which was also the 10th year of Ning Xuema's disappearance. If Lizine couldn't successfully trigger the lightning tribulation, she could only wait for death. Seeing that the deadline was approaching, Rongyi Yuishinlin was so anxious that a few strands of his hair were messed up. He could only ask Di Zun, what if Little Fox couldn't trigger the lightning tribulation on the last day? Di Zun was silent for a long time. In the end he only said a few words, "A god's promise is worth 10,000 gold. I will let her experience the lightning tribulation as scheduled." Just as Rongyi Yuishinlin was wondering what method Di Zun would use to trigger the lightning tribulation, news came from the Sun Moon sect that Di Zun and Lizine were going to be engaged. Thus Rongyi Yuishinlin calmed down. On the day of Di Zun's engagement he couldn't be bothered to go. What was there to attend an engagement ceremony that was just to fool the heavens and trigger the lightning tribulation? After that, he heard that the engagement didn't happen because Lizine just happened to be promoted. After successfully triggering the lightning tribulation, Di Zun helped her block it and then went into seclusion. Rongyi Yuishinlin finally heaved a sigh of relief. He originally planned to visit in a few days. Who would have thought that Di Zun would actually come down from the sky today and even carry a person? Ning Xuema was in a daze. She was as obedient as a little wooden puppet. Wherever he put her she would stay there. Although her eyes were black, they didn't have any luster. It was as if she had sunk into an unknown place where no one could enter and no one could come out. Rongyi Yuishinlin diagnosed her for a long time and finally came to a conclusion: this is a bit like autism. Xinjiuli raised his head and looked at him. It was obvious that he had never heard of this term. Rongyi Yuishinlin sighed. Most of this illness is inborn, but a small part of it is caused by severe stimulation in the later stages. This kind of patient has no sense of the outside world. Her consciousness only hides in her own world. Xinjiuli didn't want to listen to him talk about medicine, so he asked, "Is there a way to treat it?" Rongyi Yuishinlin looked at Xinjiuli, who kept holding Ning Xuema in his arms, and asked an irrelevant question. Di Zun, Miss Ning, should be Shuilan's wife now, right? I think she just had a miscarriage. Why don't you call Shuilan over? Why did you call him? Rongyi Yuishinlin coughed. Xiaoxian has a method that can be tried, but that method is a little, well, it's best to let the person closest to her do it. It would be best if Shuilan is her husband. Shinjuli didn't look too good. Who told you that Shui Lan is her husband? Rong Yuetian raised her eyebrows. Wasn't that what everyone in the Jianghu said? Moreover, she had just had a miscarriage and the only person who had been close to her for the past 10 years was Shui Lan. Therefore it was obvious who the father of the child was. Shinjuli said indifferently, she has nothing to do with Shui Lan. The child in her belly is mine. It was like a sudden clap of thunder. Rangi Yuishinlan was stunned. But Dizun Shaoxian remembers that you and Miss Ning haven't seen each other for 10 years. How can she have your child? There are other secrets to this matter. You don't have to ask any more. What exactly is that method of yours? How confident are you? Shinjuli was very straightforward. He only cared about the most important thing. Rangi Yuishinlan scratched her head with her fan. I saw this method in an ancient book. I haven't used it specifically, so I can only try. Shinjuli was speechless. So he was the first one to encounter this? How will your method harm her? Chapter 15-14. It's not harmful to her, but it might be dangerous to you, Dizun. Also, you might have to sacrifice your body. Shinjuli was speechless. He said expressionlessly, tell me the specific steps. Thus, Rangi Yuishinlan coughed and told him the specific steps shamelessly. Shinjuli looked at him for a moment. Where did you learn such a wretched method from? Rangi Yuishinlan coughed again. I found that book in a cave in another world. It said that this method was passed down by an ancient god called Supremacy Gu Yao. I've never heard of it. Rangi Yuishinlan smiled apologetically. I've never heard of it either. However, since he's a god from another world, his method should be useful, right? Of course, if you don't want to use this method, let me think for a few more days. Maybe there are other methods. No need. Shinjuli carried Ning Shuema and turned to leave. Prepare a quiet room. Shinjuli had woken up in this quiet room. This was the room that Shinjuli had woken up in. It was extremely clean and had rich spiritual qi. A huge bed was placed in the middle of the room. The bed curtains were painted with complicated spell patterns using cinnabar. There was no wind in the room, but the bed curtains swayed like waves, causing the spell patterns to sway and flash with light. Shinjuli gently placed Ning Shuema on the bed and kissed her on the lips. Shuema, I'll definitely call you back. I'll never let you leave me. Ning Shuema didn't speak or move. She only looked at the empty space with her dark eyes without any luster. She obediently let him fiddle with her and let him take off her layers of clothes. As her clothes were taken off, her white jade-like skin was revealed inch by inch. Shinjuli tried his best to calm his mind and not let himself be distracted. He had cultivated for many years and had almost no sexual desires. Before he met Ning Shuema, he had no such thoughts at all. Later, Ning Shuema returned as his disciple. Not long after they met, he had the desire to hug her. The more they touched, the more he had the urge to pounce on her when he saw her in front of him. Later on, he had forced himself upon her out of anger. Not long after, he had recovered the memories of Shui Yimo. Only then did he realize that he and Shui Yimo had already had many intimate encounters. She was the poppy in his life. Even though he knew it was poisonous, he would gladly endure it. After not seeing her for 10 years, he missed her so much that he was about to go crazy. Now that she had returned to his embrace, when she appeared in front of him like a white sheep, no matter how high his cultivation was, he could not control himself. He abruptly averted his gaze and quickly took off his robe as well. Then he jumped onto the bed and pulled her into his embrace. According to Rongyue Tianlan, they had to meet naked. He had to hold her in his arms and sit facing each other. Then he would press a few acupoints on her back and the back of her head and let his mind power slowly penetrate. When their auras were completely intertwined, he could use the soul-chasing technique to enter her consciousness, find her main soul inside, and bring her out. When Shinjuli held Ning Shuema in his arms, he felt that he had used this method before. However, he couldn't remember when he had used it. The woman in his arms had smooth and soft skin. The touch was extraordinarily good. Shinjuli closed his eyes slightly and tried his best to control his mind. After all, he was anxious to save her, so this kind of test was nothing to him. Chapter 15-15. Shinjuli closed his eyes, trying to control his mind. After all, he was in a hurry to save someone, so this sort of test wasn't much to him. He was also a god, so his ability to control himself wasn't ordinary. Thus, he was able to completely calm down after a moment. He followed Rong Yuishinlan's instructions step by step. The two people's skin were tightly pressed against each other, hugging each other like Siamese fish. They could hear each other's breaths. This was an extremely intimate position that could only be done between husband and wife. Shenjiuli was incomparably glad that he knew that the child was his and that she wasn't Shui Yilan's wife. Otherwise, if he knew this method, he would only be able to helplessly watch as Shui Yilan did it for Ning Xuema. He was afraid that he would have the impulse to destroy Carefree Island. His deep blue eyes stared into Ning Xuema's inky black pupils. Then he allowed his soul to slowly enter her spiritual sea. Everyone had 7 emotions and 6 desires. Thus, the spiritual sea was often grotesque and strange. Thoughts came one after another, and each thought could cause a soul to fly out. Thus, Rong Yuishenlin had solemnly told him that the main soul's thoughts should be the most powerful and also the most beautiful. This was because that was what the main soul yearned for. Then, as Shenjiuli entered, his heart sank. Her spiritual sea was pitch black, as if it were a dark black hole without any color at all. As soon as he entered, he stepped into a despairing darkness. He couldn't see the way out, nor could he see the way back. Xuema, Xuema. He walked forwards in her spiritual sea, calling out to her over and over again, but he didn't receive any response. How could this be? Where was her main soul? He searched frantically inside, looking left and right, hoping to find a trace of her. Everything in front of him was pitch black, as if a bottomless abyss would appear at his feet. He didn't care about anything else, he only wanted to find her and bring her back. However, her main soul seemed to have disappeared, and even all of her hopes had disappeared. He stumbled around for a long time but still couldn't find her shadow. Dizwa, you must remember that you can't stay in her sea of consciousness for more than 4 hours. If you do, your soul will be seriously injured and might even be devoured by her sea of consciousness, never to come out again. This was what Rongyue Tianlan had told him. He had been inside for almost 4 hours, but he still had nothing to show for it. Rongyue Tianlan sat in his own room. He kept staring at the incense stick that represented the time. The incense stick was getting shorter and shorter, and was about to burn to the end, but there was still no movement from the ancestor's side. In the end, he couldn't hold himself back any longer. He placed his hand on the incense stick that he had cast a spell on. Through this incense stick, he could interact with the venerable sovereign who had entered his knowledge sea twice. Dizwa, how is it? The time is almost up. If you can't find her main soul, you can come out first. You can use it again after you have some rest. Shenjiuli didn't say anything. This method could be used again, but it would have to wait for a month, and he didn't want to wait for another day. He didn't want to give up until the last moment. Suddenly, there was a flicker of white light in front of him. His heart moved and he couldn't help but rush towards the flickering white light. Then he found that he had landed on a street full of snow. The snow on the ground was a foot deep and stepping on it was like stepping into a quagmire. In her sea of consciousness, Shenjiuli couldn't use any spells. He couldn't even use his lightness skill so as to avoid shaking her sea of consciousness and causing it to collapse completely. Therefore he could only trudge through the snow with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow. Chapter 15-16. This street was supposed to be bustling, but in his sea of consciousness, it was terrifyingly quiet. Dense snowflakes danced in the air, and the cold wind blew the snowflakes onto his face. It was as cold as a knife. There was not a single person on the street, and the shops on both sides were in ruins. It was as if this was an ancient city that had been abandoned for a long time. Where was this? Shenjiuli couldn't help but look around. He vaguely felt that this was Bulow City. However, Bulow City was as warm as spring all year round, and every shop was as gorgeous as possible. How could it be as silent as this place? Suddenly, a thin figure appeared in front of him. Shenjiuli's heart thumped violently. Ning Xuema. She had finally appeared. He had finally found her. He didn't dare to call out to her. The sea of consciousness was constantly changing, and if he alarmed her, she might disappear immediately. He used a little light body technique and quickly ran behind her. He formed a seal with his hand and lifted his hand to grab her shoulder. Xuema. However, he grabbed nothing. His hand passed through her body and he couldn't grab her at all. Ning Xuema continued to walk forward, and she didn't even turn back to look at him. Shenjiuli was stunned on the spot for a moment. His technique had always worked on capturing souls, so why didn't it work this time? He watched as she walked into the distance again, and he hurriedly followed her. He rushed in front of her, and when he finally saw her face, his heart turned cold. Her small face was blank and there was no expression. She only walked, mechanically walking, and trudged aimlessly on this cold and lonely street. He reached out to hug her, but what he hugged was nothing. He couldn't see any hope in her eyes. Her soul and her body were the same, as if they were just mechanically alive. Shuema. He called out to her again and again, but she didn't respond. Suddenly, a clothing store appeared in front of him, and that clothing store was actually of normal color. It became the only color on the entire street. Shenjiuli's vision blurred, and Ning Shuema suddenly disappeared. His heart sank. While he was anxiously looking for her, he discovered that she had appeared in the clothing store. Her attire had also changed. Her head and face were covered in dirt and she looked a little down and out. However, her eyes were extremely bright, just like her usual appearance. She was talking to the boss of the clothing store. From time to time, she would take a piece of paper and scribble on it. Shenjiuli walked over and looked at the paper she had drawn. Then he froze. What was drawn on the paper were sets of children's clothes. There were boys' clothes and girls' clothes. Every set was exquisitely designed and beautiful. It was clear that the designer had put in a lot of effort. The shop owner watched from the side and exclaimed from time to time. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, "Young lady, are you going to order it for a boy or a girl?" Ning Shuema said without hesitation, "It's still too young. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. Give me a few sets of each. Even if one of them is not useful now, it will be useful in the future. It's always good to be prepared." The shop owner smiled. "Young lady, you haven't even given birth to this child yet, but you're already preparing for the second one. You and your husband must be very loving." Ning Shuema's finger that was drawing paused, but then she smiled again. "Of course we will definitely be very loving. I want to give birth to a bunch of little monkeys for him. He has always liked peace and quiet. I'll let these children disturb him to death." When she said this, her eyes curved into crescents and she was full of smiles. Chapter 15-17. When she said this, her eyes were full of smiles, and there was even a hint of pride at the corner of her lips. Obviously, she was looking forward to the future that she had outlined. She finally finished the drawings and handed them to the shop owner solemnly. She told her to tailor them carefully and that money was not a problem. The shop owner agreed readily. When she sent her out, she added, "Next time, come with your husband to get these little clothes. He will be very happy when he sees them." Ning Shuema flipped her long hair and looked back with a free and easy smile. "Of course. I'm going to find him now. He will definitely come with me." Shenjiuli watched from the side. His face was pale and his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. He finally understood that this should be the first place Ning Shuema came back from the black hole. At that time she was still full of hope for him in the future. She still hoped that he would come with her to get those little clothes. And what did he bring to her? It was a complete nightmare. He couldn't help but follow her out. He looked at her hand caressing her belly and muttering to herself, "Baby, mommy finally brought you back alive. I was really afraid that I couldn't come back. I was really afraid that I couldn't protect you. I was really afraid that I would never see him again. You must be laughing at mommy for being so disappointing. You are so useless to miss a man. I don't look like the domineering agent I used to be, right?" She looked up at the sky and sighed softly, "But I just miss him. I only love him in my previous life and in this life. I want to forget him but I can't." She sighed again. "In my previous life I was the one who wronged him first. I stabbed him for a friend. At that time I thought that he was a god and he wouldn't die even if I took a little blood from his heart. I didn't expect. Fortunately, mommy was brave enough at that time. In order to revive him, I used the forbidden technique of the demon world and banished myself to the dark place. I made myself a coffin and killed myself. I used the fate of being a jinx in the future in exchange for his rebirth. It's so hateful that he always thought that his revival was only due to Long Chuan. In fact, I also contributed to it. When we meet this time, I will make it clear to him. If he still thinks about this, I won't let my baby call him daddy anymore." Shenjiuli, who was listening at the side, was thunderstruck. He staggered. His face was extremely pale. There was actually such a complicated story behind his resurrection. She had actually ended up like this in her previous life, so this was how her fate as a heavenly cursed lone star came about. He followed beside Ning Shuema and watched as she bought a set of beautiful clothes for herself. After putting it on, she twirled in a circle. "Baby, isn't mommy very beautiful now? I must amaze him." Shenjiuli stared at her blankly. His outstretched arms trembled slightly, and he wanted to hug her tightly. "Shuema, Shuema." Just as he stretched out his arm, a violent gust of wind rose in front of him, and turbid water poured down from the sky, instantly drowning the small city that had just recovered its vitality. The world became dark again and there was no sign of life. Shuema. Shinjuli watched as Ning Shuema, who was still twirling in front of him, was swept away by the turbid water. He pounced forward and grabbed her waving arm. His palm had clearly touched her arm, but it still passed through like before. He couldn't grab her body at all and could only watch as she was swallowed by the turbid water. She didn't look at him from beginning to end, and she didn't even struggle when she was swallowed by the turbid water, as if she had already accepted her fate. Chapter 15:18. A voice floated in the air. Baby, the road to the Yellow Springs is lonely. Mommy will accompany you. Shinjuli was scared out of his wits. He jumped into the turbid current without caring about anything else. He wanted to get her back and hug her in his arms, but the turbid current seemed to reject him. With this jump, his body actually bounced out. Then a voice suddenly sounded beside his ear. Dizwa, you have to come back. Shinjuli's vision turned black. His consciousness was forced back. He was still sitting on the big bed. Ning Shuema's body was warm in his arms, and her eyes were still empty. No matter how he called her, she wouldn't answer him. Shinjuli had just retracted his consciousness when he felt a metallic taste in his throat. The blood in his chest was surging and he almost vomited blood. He stared blankly at Ning Shuema in his arms. She was clearly in his arms, but he felt like she was thousands of miles away from him. He couldn't touch her anymore. He helped her put on her clothes. She was obedient, raising her hands and moving her feet when he asked her to. He also put on his own clothes. Then he carried her and said gently, Shuema, I'll accompany you to get your clothes. I'll accompany you? He walked out with big strides while carrying her and bumped into Rongyu Ishinlin, who was rushing over. Rongyu Ishinlin's expression was very bad. He was performing the ritual in the room next door. Shinjuli didn't come out on time, and he was afraid that there would be an accident. Therefore he forcefully used a forbidden spell to pull the Dizwa out. After using the spell, he seemed to have lost all his strength and almost couldn't move. He wanted to lie down and sleep. However, he was worried about the Dizwa's situation. If he didn't come out on time, the Dizwa's soul would be damaged greatly. If it was an ordinary immortal, his soul would have been swallowed by the other party's sea of consciousness after such a long time, never to come out again. Although the Dizwa was a god and his soul was stronger than any immortal, everyone was equal in the face of such a spell. In the past, a certain immortal from the celestial world had tried to get his wife back by entering her sea of consciousness. However, he was only able to surpass her by a little. When he came out, his power was reduced to zero, and his soul was almost destroyed. He had to reincarnate 7 times before his soul was restored. However, the ancestor had been inside for almost 2 hours. If Rongyue Tianlan hadn't forcefully used a forbidden technique to pull him out, he might have been able to stay inside until the end of time. Now that he had successfully dragged the old man out, he did not know how badly he was injured. Would he turn into a boy directly? He had forced himself to rush over, but he hadn't expected that the ancestor would actually be carrying Ning Shuema out. Very good, a god is indeed a god, very good at tormenting. He stretched out his arm to stop Shinjuli and asked with a sour expression, Dizwa, where are you going? Shinjuli pursed his lips. I'll take her to the immortal nation. Rongyue Tianlan clenched her fists and took a deep breath. I feel that Dizwa should meditate for 2 days to recover. I'm fine, I don't need to rest. Shinjuli walked around him and left. Rongyue Tian pulled on his sleeve and finally lost her temper. Dizwa, are you relying on your status as a god? So what if you're a god? A god can also get injured. You also need to rest. You're as pale as a ghost now. How many days have you not rested? Don't forget that you've just endured a lightning tribulation. Even if you're an immortal god, you shouldn't be tormenting yourself like this. Before he could finish complaining, his hands were empty and his vision blurred. The god who was standing there just a moment ago had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 15:19. Only Shinjuli's words were left in the air. I'll be back soon. Rongyu Tianlan was speechless. He was so angry that his hands were trembling, and he almost couldn't hold onto his fan anymore. Suddenly he kicked a mountain rock beside him into the air. He shouted rebelliously, Shinjuli, I've had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to meet you. Just as he finished shouting, a hole suddenly appeared in the barrier on the island and a big red figure fell out. Red clothes, black hair and a handsome face. He was an extremely handsome man. The handsome man's expression was both proud and a little angry. This stupid barrier has finally been broken by me. Shinjuli, don't even think about getting rid of me. Rongyu Tianlan held his fan and looked at him expressionlessly. Shuilan. Shuilan looked Rongyu Tianlan up and down, then rushed over. He raised his hand and grabbed Rongyu Tianlan's collar. You're that fairy doctor Rongyu Tianlan? How is Shuema? Is she awake? Rongyu Tianlan had always paid attention to his image, so how could he allow someone to grab his collar? What's more, he had nowhere to vent his anger. Thus he took a step back and smiled brightly. You want to know about her situation? Very well, then you have to break my array first. As he spoke, his figure disappeared at the speed of light, and in the blink of an eye, his shadow disappeared. And Shui Ilan's surroundings completely changed. It was as if he had plunged into a maze. The outside world had already changed and everything had changed, but the immortal nation was still the same. Time seemed to have stopped here and the streets were still bustling. Shinjuli carried Ning Shuema and walked on the crowded streets. He didn't deliberately hide his tracks and appeared with his original appearance. His appearance was still unbelievably beautiful even in the immortal nation, where the average appearance was high. Moreover, he was carrying a beautiful girl in red clothes in his arms. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. Shinjuli ignored all the onlookers. He carried Ning Shuema and walked into the boutique that he remembered from his memory. The shopkeeper still recognized Ning Shuema. He let out a long sigh of relief and said, Aya, young master, is this lady's husband? This lowly one thought that she wouldn't come again. It's a pity for those little clothes. Guest, you know that our immortal kingdom doesn't have children. No matter how beautiful those little clothes are, they can't be sold. What's wrong with this lady? Are you sick? As she spoke, she had already taken out those little clothes and lined them up on the counter. Dear customer, look, these clothes were all designed by your wife herself. Anyone who sees them will say that they're beautiful. Shinjuli's fingers slowly landed on those little clothes, caressing them one by one. Both the quality and style of the clothes were top-notch. There were 8 sets for both men and women. It could be imagined just how much she longed for these clothes when she designed them. Shuema, look, the clothes you wanted for your child are all made. Let's take them back together, all right? Shinjuli hugged Ning Shuema's waist as he warmly discussed with her. Ning Shuema's eyes were still empty, and it was unknown where her divine sense had fallen. Shinjuli's heart twisted. He placed the smallest set in her hands and said, Shuema, when our child is born, let him wear this set first. His mother personally designed it, so it will definitely be very comfortable for him to wear. He then put away all of the little girl's clothes and said, This is what our next baby will wear. I'll keep it for you first. Chapter 15:20. He carefully folded the clothes one by one and put them into his storage space. The shop owner next to them couldn't help but look at Ning Shuema and ask, This little girl was fine when she came here. Is she suffering from soulless syndrome? Aya, it's not easy to recover from this illness. She will recover. Shinjuli interrupted him and added, We will come here to order clothes for our children in the future. Shinjuli didn't ask how much money they still owed. Instead, he threw down a bag of crystals and left with Ning Shuema. He took her to another ready-made women's clothing store. In Ning Shuema's mind, he once saw her buy a set of clothes here. After wearing it, she wanted to show it to him so that he could praise her. In the end, he didn't see it. When he saw her again, she was wearing a dancer's dress to present it to him. Then she smashed her pipa. He couldn't recall the past. Once he did, he felt as if his heart was being clawed by a steel claw. He took a light breath and walked around the store with her in his arms. Finally, he found clothes of the same style that she had bought before. He bought a set and put it in her hands. Shuema, put it on again and show it to me. He suddenly stopped talking and looked at Ning Shuema's hands. His heart started to beat rapidly. Ever since she became autistic, she had been very obedient and would do whatever she was told to do. However, she could not hold anything tightly in her hands. No matter what was put in her hands, she would be able to take it out with a casual grab. However, she was holding the set of clothes that Shinjuli had put in her hands tightly. Shinjuli tried to pull it out, but he couldn't. Her 2 small hands were holding the clothes tightly. Her gaze fell on the clothes in her hands. Although she was still in a daze, she was no longer staring blankly at a certain place in the void. She had a reaction. Shinjuli's heart almost jumped out of his chest. Shuema, Shuema. He tried to call her. She was still in a daze, but her gaze never left the small clothes. Shinjuli held her tightly in his arms and whispered in her ear, "Shuema, I will call you back. I will find our child. Dizun, you mustn't." This was the first sentence that Rangyue Shenlin said after hearing Shinjuli's plan. However, Shinjuli had already made up his mind. She's having a slight reaction to this now. If I bring the child back, she might recover immediately. If she wants children, you can have more in the future. She could have as many children as she wanted. We don't have to go back to the original one. Rongyue Tianlan was rarely excited. No, this child is her obsession. Everything will only be possible if we find this child. But, no buts. As long as she can come back, even if I suffer a little, it's nothing. Shinjuli looked at Ning Shuema, who was sitting on the bed next to him. Her eyes never left the clothes in her hands. He took a breath and said, "Tianlan, take good care of her. I'll be back soon." He turned to leave, but Rangyue Shenlin grabbed him. "Dizwa, even if you want to go, you should rest first. You don't look well now, and using that method consumes a lot of your mind power. I'm afraid that even if you have the strength to revive the child, you won't be able to bring it back." Shinjuli pulled back his sleeves. "It's okay. I can hold on. Take good care of her. Don't let anything happen to her." He turned and disappeared. Chapter 1521. Rangyue Shenlin was speechless. He sat down on the chair next to him. "Dizun, can we stop for a few years and stop tormenting each other? Xiaoxian has been with you for a long time, and my heart has been tormented by both of you. My hair has also turned white." He looked at Ning Shuema, who was sitting on the bed like a wooden person. He raised his hand and rubbed his eyebrows. "Miss Ning, I hope you can live a good life with Dizun after you wake up. He has been tormented by you until he doesn't look like a god anymore. So I really miss Dizun playing chess with others leisurely." He sighed for a while and looked at Ning Shuema again. She sat there motionless. Her little clothes were wrinkled by her grip, but she had no intention of letting go. It was as if it was the only thing she could rely on to breathe. Rangyue Shenlin felt sorry for the once lively girl who had become so dull. He sighed again and shook his head. "Looking at you, you must have suffered a big blow. It's quite pitiful to see you like this. Sai, I really don't know who's the one whose tribulation. A friend's wife should not be teased. Not to mention the supreme god's woman." Therefore, Rangyue Shenlin still avoided arousing suspicion. Ning Shuema was like a piece of wood. She would take root wherever she was placed. She would not run away or make a fuss. She was more obedient than a sleeping baby. Rangyue Shenlin was naturally not afraid of her causing any trouble. He also did not want to stay in a room with her alone. After thinking for a while, he walked out. After walking out, he was still worried. He covered the room with a few layers of enchantments. After confirming that the pangolin could not find a gap, he turned around and left. Dizun must have used up a lot of telekinesis to revive the child this time. He was afraid that he would be so weak that he could not even stand when he returned. He had to prepare some pills to restore his telekinesis. He knocked his head with his fan miserably. "Rangyue Shenlin, how many pills did you put in when you wanted to get him back on the bed? Ancestor, you're lucky to have a friend like me. You must have cultivated your fortune for 8 lifetimes." Dizun was not old or dead. He only slept and did not reincarnate. He only lived this life. Did he have 8 lives? Just as Rong Yuetian was grumbling wildly in her heart, a faint red light flashed in the distance, and the air made an explosive sound. The veins on Rangyue Shenlin's forehead throbbed. Damn it, that Shui Lan is actually an expert in breaking formations. He was about to break out of the formation. It didn't matter. He would set up a few more traps for him so that he wouldn't come out and bother him again. Rongyue Tianlan moved forward with her fan. Shui Lan simply hated that guy and blew to the bone. He only wanted to know about Momo's recent situation, not to kill or burn. That bastard actually trapped him in a bewitching array without saying anything. Fortunately, his ability to break through arrays had improved over the years, so after running left and right for 6 to 8 hours, he finally found the core of the array. He sneered and used all his strength to strike at the core of the array. With a loud clap of thunder, the surrounding fog finally dispersed. He finally saw the real trees and houses of Carefree Island. At the same time, he also saw Rangyue Shenlin standing not too far away, waving her fan. Shui Lan threw himself at her. "Flirty Lan Yu." Before Shui Lan arrived in front of her, Rangyue Shenlin waved her fan again. In front of Shui Lan, a peach blossom forest suddenly appeared. The peach blossom forest was filled with blooming flowers and butterflies. The scenery was beautiful. Chapter 1522. He abruptly turned his head, and only then did he realize that in front of him, behind him, to his left and to his right, there were also thick peach trees. It was obvious that he had fallen into the peach blossom array. Shuilan was furious. Everyone said that Dr. Fairy Rong Yu Tianlan's medical skills were brilliant, but he didn't expect his array skills to be so brilliant as well. He didn't know where his lousy fan came from, but he could create an array with just a wave of his fan. Shuilan was trapped in the array, and he even had the thought of tearing down the island. Flirtatious Lan, if you have the ability, trap me forever. Otherwise, once I break your array, I will immediately tear down your island and throw you into the sea to feed the turtles. He took a deep breath and began to look for a way to break the array. Outside the array, Rong Yu Tianlan stood there for a moment and tapped his palm with his fan. He frowned and thought, Flirtatious Lan? This red-clothed bastard actually gave him such a nickname as soon as they met. Was he flirtatious? He wasn't flirtatious, was he? At most he was a little unruly. A demon was a demon, so ignorant. He looked at the fan in his hand. This fan was his treasure, called the Heaven and Earth fan. It could be flirtatious when waving it, and it was an excellent weapon in a fight. When necessary, it could even set up an array in time to trap the ghosts and monsters who came looking for trouble. He looked up at the sky and sighed softly. The D-Zun was probably casting a spell on Tianshu Mountain now, right? Hopefully he could succeed in one try. Tianshu Mountain's sixth summit, the rocks were still there, and the broken trees were still lying on the ground. However, the branches and leaves were already dry. The ground was covered with grass. If one looked carefully, they could still see the dried blood stains between the branches and leaves. Shinjuli stood on the hillside and looked at everything in front of him. His fingertips and his sleeves were cold. Everything that happened that day seemed to be in front of him. Ning Xuema, who had just miscarried, was sent flying by his white light and hit the big tree over there. The tree was still standing there, unshakable. Shinjuli walked to the tree and touched it. He looked there, as if he could still see the scene of her lying beside the tree and then struggling to get up. Xuema. He felt as if there was a knife twisting in his heart. He was ruthless to the woman who loved him wholeheartedly and was pregnant with his baby. He saved the woman who killed his baby. If I could turn back time, it was a pity that time could not be reversed no matter what. What happened was what happened, and he could no longer reverse the damage of that day. His fingers were pressed convulsively against the tree, and his face was pale. Returning to this place, it was as if everything had happened yesterday. He saw the big rock that Ning Xuema had sat on. There, she carefully protected her belly, desperately trying to keep the child, until blood flowed out, until she was at her most desperate moment. He slowly walked over. His chest was hurting badly and his blood was rushing up again. 1,000 regrets couldn't buy a second chance. He took a deep breath and steadied his mind. He was here to give birth to a child, not to regret his actions. He had to bring the child back to life so that he could make up for the damage he had done to her. He had never known about that child, and by the time he found out, it was already too late. That child was his and Xuema's first child. He had never doted on it, and it was gone just like that. How could he be willing to accept it? He sat on the big rock. Many of the bloodstains on the rock had turned dark brown. That day he also saw the blood on the rock and thought it was Luzien's. He didn't know that it was from Ning Xuema's miscarriage. Chapter 1523. When he saw the blood on it that day, he thought it was Luzien's blood. How could he have known that it was from Ning Xuema's miscarriage? Now that he saw it, it was unusually glaring. It made his heart tighten again. He took a light breath again and threw all the distracting thoughts out of his mind. What he had to do next required him to be calm and focused. He couldn't have any distracting thoughts. Only then could he have a chance of success. After all, the child was only 4 months old. It hadn't really taken shape yet, and its soul was incomplete. It didn't even have the ability to become a baby spirit. If this child had a miscarriage, it wouldn't be difficult to summon its soul. Shinjuli could do it easily. However, if he wanted to revive the child, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven. This was because he had to repair its soul. After the repair was complete, he had to reconstruct its flesh and blood. The flesh and blood of a baby came from the blood of its father and mother. According to myths and legends, Neza once used his bones to return his father and flesh to return his mother. If Shinjuli wanted the child to come back intact, he had to make a main bone in his body and let the child attach to it first. Then he would talk about other things. This kind of technique was the most heaven-defying. It could be said that from ancient times until now, There was almost no one who used this method to revive a fetus before 1 month of age. It was also a real stealing of the good fortune of heaven and earth. It could easily cause the heavens to be jealous and devour the caster. If he didn't do it well, he could even summon the heavenly thunder and destroy the caster's soul. This technique was a big taboo in the immortal cultivation world. There were very few people who committed this taboo. Even if the child of a celestial family was miscarried before 1 month of age, they could have another one after they recovered. There was no need to sacrifice a big one for a small one. This was also the main reason why Rong Yuetian strongly opposed the idea of the Dizun when she heard about it. Shinjuli was a god. There were very few things in this world that could baffle him. There were also very few people or things that he really cared about. In his eyes, there was only whether he wanted to do it or not whether he could do it or not. He closed his eyes slightly, and his fingers continuously formed seals. Countless white lights flowed and danced on his fingertips. Following the movement of his fingers, the dried blood stains under his body actually began to turn bright red again. It slowly began to flow, like a bright red little snake climbing up the hem of his white robe, slowly climbing up the back of his hand, and spreading towards his fingertips. The blood-red snake grew thicker and thicker. It climbed onto his fingertips and began to coil around them. Ka. With a soft sound, a small white bone emerged from Shinjuli's palm. The bone was very thin, even thinner than a baby's finger. It was extremely white and bright, flashing with a faint light. This was not an ordinary bone, but rather a bone that Shinjuli had condensed using his divine blood essence. When it broke out of his body, his face was even paler and there was almost no trace of blood. Refining this was obviously extremely painful. Although Shinjuli didn't show anything on his face, his white robe was drenched in sweat at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, he only pursed his lips and continued to form seals with his fingers. When the blood saw the small bone, it instantly swam over and circled around the small bone. Layers of red light slowly appeared on the white bone. Under the red light, the flesh on the small bone gradually grew, like a fetus growing rapidly in the womb. Gradually, it grew 4 limbs, a head, and became a small ball of flesh. After 2 hours, the technique to reconstruct the flesh was finally completed. He also finally stopped cultivating. His whole body looked like he had just been fished out of the water. Even his hair was drenched. Chapter 1524. He obviously wasn't used to his own sloppy appearance. He lifted his hand, wanting to use a cleansing technique on himself, but he had exhausted all his strength. Even lifting his little finger was difficult. He could only give up for now. He looked down at the small ball of meat in his palm. The ball of meat was curled up in his palm. Because it didn't have a soul yet, it was motionless. This ball of meat should be exactly the same as the one that Ning Xuema gave birth to. Although he couldn't see the facial features, Shinjuli still thought it was beautiful. In the future, this child's facial features would be like his, and its mouth and nose would be like its mother's. Shinjuli could even imagine what this little ball of meat would look like after it was born. After completing this step, he would have completed half of the resurrection mission. He used his spiritual force to protect the ball of meat. Then he ate several pills and closed his eyes to rest for a moment. In the end, he was a god. His restorative abilities were amazing. A moment later, his white robes were dry and his long hair fluttered in the wind once more. He stood up and looked towards the direction of Carefree Island. He gently sighed, "Xuema, our child will return soon. You should also return." After he protected the ball of meat, he began to cast another spell. This time it was a soul-summoning technique. Carefree Island Rong Yuishinlin had just finished refining a furnace of pills when he seemed to sense something and suddenly stood up. He hurriedly walked out. Petals fluttered in the air. A crimson figure finally broke through the peach blossom array and rushed out, covered in peach blossoms. Shuilan's entire body was suffused with a thick killing intent. His handsome face was like an azurus. Before Rong Yuishinlin could speak, he shot out a red beam of light. "Stupid Rong Yuishinlin, go die." When he attacked with anger, his destructive power was naturally astonishing. As he attacked, strong winds whipped up as sharp as knives. Rong Yuishinlin couldn't dodge because behind him was his precious medicine field. If he didn't block this attack, all of the flowers and plants behind him would suffer a calamity. He could only lift his fan and forcefully receive this attack. He swung his fan back. The two ferocious forces collided with each other. It was as if thunder had struck in the air, causing the entire island to tremble. A small pavilion at the side could not withstand such an explosive force and was directly sent flying into the air, turning into a sky full of debris that fell down. Heavens, his Tauran pavilion. He had built it purely by hand, brick by brick. His proudest work had actually flown away just like that. It flew away. Rongyu Ishinlan was also angry. Shuilan, are you looking for death? The fan opened up, and a gust of wind gathered around it. It was about to fan Shuilan. He wanted to fan him out of the island. Shuilan laughed. Courting death? If you don't hand him over, I'll tear down your broken island. The two of them did not agree with each other and started to fight. Rongyu Ishinlan was also annoyed. He wanted to teach Shuilan a lesson. Otherwise, this red-clothed evildoer would think that he, the island master, was easy to bully. He was afraid of destroying his flowers and plants, pavilions, terraces, and buildings. He simply activated the array formation in the middle of the fight and lured Shuilan into the array formation again. The two of them started to fight in the array formation. For a moment the sky was dark and the earth was dark. The sun and moon did not shine. There was blood everywhere. There was blood under his feet, on his body, and on the stone road in the distance. Even the sky was bright red with blood. Ning Shuima's body was trembling. She couldn't help but tremble. She was repeating a dream. In the dream, she first happily sensed the existence of her child. Chapter 1525. In the dream, she first happily sensed the existence of her child. Then she desperately tried to travel back in the dark sky. Then she came to Bulow City to buy clothes for her child. Until she was harmed by Luzine and had a miscarriage. Finally, it ended when she was slapped away. This dream repeated itself. Each time it was more realistic than the last. Each time it was more heart-wrenching than the last. It caused her mood to fall from the climax of joy to the abyss of despair. It also caused her to feel more and more hopeless. She only wanted to find a place to hide herself. She wanted to hide and ignore this world. She didn't want to feel this pain anymore. She had suffered a lot in her life. She was even thrown into a copper cauldron to be boiled. She thought that the pain was already the limit of pain. However, she didn't expect that the pain was nothing compared to the pain she was experiencing now. As the dream repeated itself over and over again, her stomach felt like it was being scraped by a knife. It was a pain of despair. It was so painful that she broke out in layers of cold sweat. She wished she could die immediately. She wanted to end her own life. However, she couldn't find her hand in the dream. If it wasn't for the heart-wrenching pain, she wouldn't have been able to feel her own body. She subconsciously wanted to escape, so she started to run. She ran without caring about her life. Running like this, she no longer had the same recurring dream. However, the pain in her body didn't decrease at all. A bloody road opened up in front of her. She ran on this endless bloody road. She wanted to escape from something, but she also seemed to want to pursue something. As she ran like this, she became dizzy from all the running. In the end, her mind was blank. She couldn't think at all. She didn't know why she was running. She also didn't know where she was going. This kind of running was subconscious. It was as if running like this would no longer hurt her body. Wah! The faint cry of a child came from the front. That cry was heart-wrenching. It caused her heart to clench. Her entire body froze. Then she seemed to have remembered something. She trembled and subconsciously touched her lower abdomen. That place was deflated. Other than the overwhelming pain, she couldn't feel anything else. Baby. Her baby. Her heart seemed to be torn apart at that moment. She started to stagger and ran towards the crying sound with all her might. The crying sound seemed to be near yet far. However, it kept echoing in her ears. The intense pain and constant running made her extremely tired, but the child's cries made her unable to stop running. After running for an unknown amount of time, the crying suddenly stopped. The surroundings fell into silence and not a single sound could be heard. Baby? She looked around in panic, but she could no longer hear the crying. However, a blood-red ball of flesh appeared in front of her, hovering not far in front of her. Ning Shuima slowly walked over. She finally saw her child. Just like when she used her inner vision, it had arms, legs, a head, and a tail. It was curled up in a bag of blood. It seemed to be in great pain. It was trembling non-stop and faint cries could be heard from it. She seemed to hear the child crying, "Mommy, it hurts. Mommy, it hurts. Boo-hoo, mommy, it hurts. Mommy, just kill me. I don't want to be in so much pain." Over and over again she cried out in pain over and over again. At first the voice was very soft, but then it became louder and louder. His voice pierced Ning Xuema's heart like a knife, causing her to curl up subconsciously. Chapter 1526. She reached out her trembling hand. Baby, bear with it. Mommy will save you. Why no? It hurts, it hurts. The child struggled violently in the blood. Just like what she saw with her inner vision before the miscarriage, it kept twitching, her child. The child that she was not fated to have. The child that she could not keep even after using all her means. Perhaps this was her fate. What you wanted could never be kept. Love was like this, and so was children. Ning Xuema's eyes widened as she looked at the child who was crying and screaming there, and then inevitably melting bit by bit. Her heart was being dismembered inch by inch. She just looked at it like this, staring blankly, and her body kept trembling. What? If she had done something wrong and loved the wrong person, then God would punish her. Why did he treat her child like this? What was wrong with the child? Just because it was considerate? Just because it was her child? It was unfair. She did not know how long she had been standing there stiffly. She slowly reached out her hand and stroked the meatball with her fingers. She closed her eyes slightly. Baby, I'm sorry. Mommy will send you on your way. Soon you won't be in pain anymore. Flames emerged from her fingertips and surrounded the meatball. In the flames, the meatball finally stopped struggling. She watched as the child slowly disappeared. It seemed that her whole heart had disappeared along with it. She fell into hell and could no longer climb up. The flames finally dissipated little by little. All the pain disappeared and only hatred was left in her heart. Monstrous hatred. She slowly opened her eyes. Rongyue Tianlan and Shui Yingyue were fighting fiercely in the array formation. Rongyue Tianlan had not fought so happily for a long time. He felt very good. It was simply relieving the anger that he had been holding in for the past 2 days. Shui Lan was very angry. He just came to visit Momo and wanted to know her specific condition, but he was blocked by this perverted doctor. In his anger, he also fully activated his mode and used all his skills, trying to defeat Rongyue Tianlan. However, his and Rongyue Tianlan's skills were similar, and neither of them could beat the other for a while. Momo. How was Momo? He was burning with anxiety. The array formation that Rongyue Tianlan had set up this time was rather strange. They could see the real situation outside, but when they really fought, they couldn't destroy the things in the real world outside. Shui Lan was still worried about Ning Xuema. Even during the fight, he constantly scanned the surroundings, trying to guess where Ning Xuema might be. This time, after he repelled Rongyue Tianlan's attack once again, he occasionally looked up and suddenly saw wisps of green smoke coming out from a building behind Rongyue Tianlan, as if there was a fire. Who was it that was so nice to burn down this broken island? No, I can't let this flirtatious Lan see this. It would be best if they were burned clean. Shui Lan subconsciously wanted to set up a barrier behind Rongyue Tianlan to prevent Rongyue Tianlan from inadvertently looking there. Suddenly he seemed to have thought of something. No. Ning Xuema was still on this island. He didn't know if there was anyone around to take care of her. If there was no one around to take care of her, it didn't matter if this broken island was burned down, but if Ning Xuema was burned down, it would be worth it. It's on fire. He couldn't help but shout. Rongyue Tianlan initially thought that he was deliberately mystifying and subconsciously replied, "How can it be on fire, my island?" Her gaze couldn't help but follow Shui Lan's gaze and her face suddenly changed. Chapter 1527. The building that seemed to be on fire was the place where Ning Xuema was now. At this moment he no longer cared about fighting with Shui Lan. His figure flashed and rushed towards that direction like a meteor. Shui Lan saw his face change and knew that it was not good. His heart sank and he also rushed there. Rongyue Tianlan's speed was not slow. In the blink of an eye they rushed to the front of the pavilion. The fire came out from the window. The red tongue of fire almost made Rongyue Tianlan's heart sink to the bottom. God, Ning Xuema was still in the house. She looked so dull that she would not escape at all. If something bad happened to her, Di Zun would definitely kill him. Rongyue Tianlan did not care about anything else. He kicked the door open and rushed in. Ning Xuema, nothing must happen to you. The moment he rushed into the room he was stunned for a moment, something he rarely did. The house was indeed on fire, but it did not burn the furniture in the house. There were many things in the brazier in the middle of the house that were still smoking and burning, but there was no sign of Ning Xuema in the house. What happened? Rongyue Tianlan subconsciously checked the things in the brazier. His heart suddenly shrank. Those things that were burned were children's rattles, small toys, special-looking books and some special-looking papers. Even the little clothes that Ning Xuema had been holding in her hands were among them. Everything was burned in a mess. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to distinguish them. Shui Yilan also rushed in. How is Momo? If anything happens to her, I will not let you off. Hey, where is Momo? He looked at the things in the brazier again and was a little suspicious. What happened? Momo is not in the house? Then why are you running like a funeral? What is in the brazier? Why are all the things burned or children's toys? Speaking of this, he suddenly realized something. Could it be that Momo burned it herself? She woke up. Rongyue Tianlan said in a low voice, I'm afraid so. Great. Where is she now? Shui Yilan's eyes lit up. He quickly looked around the room, but he didn't see even a corner of Ning Xuema's clothes. A bad feeling arose in Rongyue Tianlan's heart. His immortal skills were extremely high, and he was used to seeing through people's invisibility. If Ning Xuema was in this room, he could find her at a glance. What would she do if she woke up in such a situation and burned everything about the child? He didn't have time to think too much and dashed out. Split up and search. We must find her. At this time, Shui Yilan naturally couldn't pursue the matter any further and also followed them out. Rongyue Tianlan could have opened his heaven's eye to search, but he had used up too much power recently and had just fought with Shui Yilan. His remaining telekinesis was not enough to open his heaven's eye in a short period of time. He could only mobilize all the disciples on the island to search. He didn't dare to use the voice-transmitting charm to inform Shinjioli. First, he knew that Shinjioli was using a forbidden technique to revive the child and couldn't be disturbed. Second, he still had a tiny sliver of hope in his heart. After all, there was an enchantment above the island and it was sealed off. Ning Xuema shouldn't be able to run out of the island. She might be hiding in some corner, sad. As long as he could find her, everything would be fine. For a time, Carefree Island was in chaos. Everyone was digging 3 feet into the ground to search for a single person. No. They had searched every inch of the island, but there was no trace of Ning Xuema. Chapter 1528. Rongyue Tianlan was about to go crazy. Ning Xuema had just recovered from her injuries. Where could she hide? Shui Yilan was also anxious. Did she leave the island? Rongyue Tianlan, doesn't your broken island have a wizardry barrier? If she left the island, you should be able to sense it, right? Rongyue Tianlan was not in a good mood. If she broke the wizardry barrier, I will naturally feel it. So she can't leave the island. She must still be on this island. Since she's on your island, why can't I find her? She can't turn into a mouse and crawl out, right? Is there a loophole in your wizardry barrier? How can there be a loophole in my wizardry barrier? No, there really is a loophole. Rongyue Tianlan suddenly thought of something, and her face changed again. Her figure flashed and she went to a place near the sea. She looked up and there was a 2-foot square hole on it, that was left behind when Shui Yilan broke in. Rongyue Tianlan was busy fighting with Shui Yilan at that time, so she forgot to fix it. She only remembered it now. She had most likely escaped from here. The world was so big, where could she go? Shinjioli stood in the same place looking at his empty fingertips. Nothing. There was no soul of the child. He couldn't sense a trace of the child's soul. He didn't know how many souls he had summoned in his life, but this was the first time he encountered such a situation. Infant spirits had always been weak, especially those who were only 4 months old. They were even weaker. Generally, after death, their souls would be blown away by the wind, and there was almost no chance for reincarnation. However, with Shinjioli's ability, even if the infant spirit was blown into tens of thousands of pieces by the wind, he could use a special method to summon it back, not a single piece. This situation wouldn't have happened. Moreover, the child was the son of God. Its soul should be stronger than any other child, and it wouldn't be blown away so easily by the wind. Shinjioli used his own blood as a primer. If it was still there, it was impossible for it not to come back. Could it be that not only did Lizine kill the child, but she also destroyed the child's soul? But no matter how scattered they were, it was impossible for him to not be able to find a single piece. There were only 2 possibilities for this to happen. First, the child was not dead at all. It was still alive. Secondly, when its soul was drifting, it encountered some spirit beasts that fed on souls and was swallowed by them. Shinjioli's hands and feet were cold. He could barely stand still. In Luzine's memory, he clearly saw that Ning Xuema had indeed suffered a miscarriage, so it was impossible that she was still alive. Then there was only the second possibility left. That child's soul had already been devoured. That kind of spirit beast feeds on souls. Even if he found the spirit beast, he wouldn't be able to find the child's soul. He had spent half of his divine power to resurrect this child. He was clearly just one step away, but he did not expect that the final result would be a failure on the verge of success. This was the only way for Ning Xuema to recover. It was the only way for him to get her back. But now he had failed. He had failed. It turned out that he, Xin Juli, also had times when he failed, and there were times when he was powerless. Could it be that even God did not think highly of their fate and wanted to completely separate them? Was this the fate of him and her? Was this the fate that he had never been able to predict? No. He did not believe in fate. He steeled his heart and did not hesitate to use his divine power to summon the soul several times, but it was still to no avail. While he was busy, the voice transmission talisman at his waist suddenly lit up. It was a pale golden light. It was sent by Rong Yuetian. Chapter 1529. His heart sank. He had once told Rong Yuishanlin not to disturb him unless there was an emergency. But now he picked up the call. What is it? Emperor's throne. Miss Ning should have woken up, but she's gone. Rong Yuishanlin's voice was filled with panic. Rong Yuishanlin was quite amazing. In just a few short sentences, the first was a pleasant surprise, but the second was a bomb. Although Shinjuli was normally calm and collected, he couldn't help but grit his teeth. What do you mean she's gone? The sovereign's voice was so cold that even through the sound-transmitting talisman, Rong Yuishanlin seemed to freeze. She didn't dare to be long-winded. She quickly explained the situation at Carefree Island to Shinjuli. Shinjuli clenched his fists in his sleeves. He didn't waste any more words with Rong Yuishanlin. He directly hung up the sound-transmitting talisman and closed his eyes to sense where Ning Xuema was. A moment later, his body stiffened and he opened his eyes. She was at the Sun Moon sect. Ning Xuema hadn't done many immoral things in her life. As a former Secret Service agent, although she could be ruthless and merciless to her enemies and even use extremely cruel methods to torture them, she still had a bottom line. She paid particular attention to repaying kindness and enmity. If she owed a debt of gratitude, she would remember it in her heart and repay it when the time was right. For her friends, she would risk her life and not hesitate to travel thousands of miles. If she had a grudge against someone, if they didn't do it on purpose or if their actions offended her, she would laugh it off or simply strike back. If you punch me, I'll kick you back. She paid particular attention to being happy and comfortable. After fighting with such a person, they might even become friends. As for those who deliberately schemed against her, then sorry. Her life motto was, if you hurt me, I'll pay you back 10 times. If you stab me, I'll cut you into pieces. Before Lizine had done those things to hurt her, she didn't have any ill feelings towards her. After all, in this relationship, it was Shinjuli who had a change of heart and fell in love with someone else. It was related to this man and had nothing to do with Lizine. Shinjuli and Lizine were engaged. Although Ning Xuema had lost her wits and suffered a huge blow, she had never had the urge to take revenge on Lizine. At most, he felt a little cold when he heard her call him Brother D at the engagement banquet. There was nothing else. She had her pride. Since her boyfriend had cheated on her and fallen in love with someone else under such circumstances, there was no need for her to make a scene at his engagement banquet and ruin his marriage just because she had a child. She just wanted to leave this place. She just wanted to bring her baby to another continent and live a peaceful life. She wanted to live a wonderful life that belonged only to her. However, what she didn't expect was that she would be secretly hunted down by the other party when she let go so easily. If Lizine had only plotted against her life, she wouldn't have hated her so much. However, this bitch had used a vicious scheme to plot against the baby she cared about the most. When she threatened Lizine to take out the antidote, she wasn't bluffing. She was telling the truth. That was the only chance she had given Lizine, but Lizine had been obsessed with her baby. Therefore, the moment she had a miscarriage, she plotted against Lizine. She wanted Lizine to pay a heavy price for this. She wanted Lizine to pay for her baby's life. No one could protect it. The moment Shinjuli arrived, he indiscriminately gave her a slap and sent her flying into a tree. He didn't know that she had just used a forbidden technique to defeat Lizine. He didn't know that she had just had a miscarriage and was still bleeding non-stop. Chapter 1530. Just because he saw his fiancée being mistreated, He had ruthlessly attacked her without the slightest bit of mercy. In that moment, in her grief, anger, and despair, she finally gave up. She wasn't someone who would easily despair. No matter what desperate situation she was in, she would always try to find a way to survive. But in that moment, she had fallen into an unprecedented despair. She never thought that after risking her life to return to this world, she would encounter such a result. Her lover had betrayed her, her child had been lost, and she could no longer return to her own world. There was nothing that could support her to continue living in this world. She had sought death with all her heart, so even though she knew she was bleeding profusely, she didn't do anything. Since she couldn't take revenge, she would accompany her child. What she didn't think was that there would be a day when she would come back to life. When she woke up on Carefree Island and saw her surroundings, she only wanted to laugh out loud. So she hadn't died. It seemed that Shinjoli had found his conscience and didn't want her to die too quickly. He had saved her and even sent her to Carefree Island to be treated by his friends. She didn't want to think about what Shinjoli's goal was. Whether it was to atone for Luzine's sins, or whether it was because he still cared about her, she didn't want to think about it. A life for a life, a debt must be paid. Since Luzine had killed her baby, she would pay with her life. She would pay with her life for her baby. If a god blocked her way, she would kill a god. If a Buddha blocked her way, she would kill a Buddha. If she had died, then that would have been fine. She would have let that Luzine off. But now she had come back to life. Since the heavens had allowed her to come back to life, she naturally had to take revenge for her baby. Thus, the moment she awoke, she had already decided what she would do in the future. She burned everything related to her baby in a brazier and severed all ties she had to this world. She knew that Luzine was Shinjoli's fiancé now. He would definitely protect her well. Just like how he had protected her before he lost his memories, he might also be inseparable. If she went to assassinate Luzine, there was a high chance she wouldn't succeed. If she angered him, he might even slam her into a wall or kill her. But she no longer cared. Her current life was something she had picked up from the ground. She would use her life to take Luzine's life. Luzine killed. Thus, after she finished burning those things, she immediately left Carefree Island and headed towards the Sun Moon sect. She had to end this quickly so that she could be free as soon as possible. When a person finally makes up her mind to do something, she will not think about anything else. She traveled as fast as lightning and arrived at Buddha Lotus Mountain very quickly. She paused in the air for a moment and lowered her eyes to look at the immortal mountain that she once missed so much. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. Without any hesitation, he pounced forward. She knew that there was a heaven's path that led directly to the heavenly sound peak. She knew that Luzine should be staying in the main hall where Shinjuli was staying. Not bad. Maybe it was because Shinjuli was too careless, or maybe it was because of other reasons, but that road was not closed. She successfully arrived above the heavenly sound peak. However, when she entered the heavenly sound peak, she encountered some obstacles. The enchantment on the heavenly sound peak had been reset. This enchantment was very powerful. Ning Xuema only needed to touch it to know that this enchantment was powerful. It should have been personally set up by Shinjoli. It seemed that Luzine was really here. Shinjoli was afraid that someone would plot against her, so he set up a new enchantment to protect her. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.